Chapter 878. Sixth Young Master, thank you for your hard work. The two of them were naturally overjoyed after being praised. Taking this opportunity, Wuxia stood up and said, "There are more and more young people who want to apply for the academy. Among them, there are many Mongolian youths. Sixth Young Master, what do you think? At the beginning of the academy, there was a rule that non-Chinese were not allowed to enter the academy. However, this was the grassland, and the majority of the population was Mongolian. Now that they saw that the people who came out of the academy were very respected and all of them were very capable, many of them wanted to study hard and change their lives. Now that he looked at it, that rule was no longer appropriate. Yes, this rule can be changed appropriately. If you want to study, you have to go through a background check first. At the same time, you have to be recommended by the senior personnel. If there is a problem, the recommendation will be responsible for the rest of your life. After the background check, you can go through the interview and assessment. Those who are smart and intelligent can be considered, but the proportion must be low. The total number of people can't exceed 10% of the academy's population." Yang Chendong thought for a while and made the change. The recommendation system of lifelong responsibility could ensure the loyalty of the people to the greatest extent. It was not just that after the recommendation, if there was a problem, the recommendation would slap his head and say that he had misjudged the person. That was absolutely not allowed. In short, the bureaucratic idea would not work for Yang Chendong. Since you are paid well, you have to work hard. If you don't want to work hard, you can withdraw from the senior personnel and be an ordinary person. This rule seemed to be a little harsh, but only Yang Chendong knew that if he couldn't do this at the beginning, it would only become harder to lead the cadre. One day, it would not be impossible for the cadre to collapse. Okay. Wuxia nodded in agreement. Although it was only 10% of the grassland quota, it was enough to stop some people from talking. By the way, Sixth Young Master, some of the old students, and even the old teachers, they feel that they have learned a lot of theoretical knowledge. Now, their minds are filled with combining theory with practice. They want to do some practical work. What do you think? That's good. Combining theory with practice is the right way to go. In this case, I have something to tell the two of you. After the beginning of the city, I have decided to build another North Desert city 300 miles west of the Immortal River, which is on the old site of the temporary capital built by Balsi and Tan at the end of the Yuan Dynasty. In this way, it can correspond to the beginning of the city, and our power and influence will be greater. The construction of a new city is a complicated and tedious matter. There are many professionals needed, such as architects, the staff of the new city lord's mansion, market managers, the establishment of Mo Bay College, logistics, medical treatment, food supply, and the reclamation of fertile land like the first city. I have already checked that there is sufficient water, the land is not bad, and the place is large. It is feasible to get millions of mu of land. Do you have any suitable candidates? Regarding the issue of building North Desert City, although there were some rumors, there had never been an official document. Now that Yang Chendong had mentioned it, it was equivalent to giving everyone a confirmation. This was actually what Yuan and Wuxia wanted to find out. Now that the matter had been confirmed, there was no change in their expressions. Obviously, they had made some preparations. Yuan was the first to speak. "Sixth Young Master, but how big is North Desert City? Is it the same as the beginning city?" Naturally, it can't be the same as the beginning city. Whether it is its geographical location or as the first city on the grassland, the role and political status of the beginning city are incomparable to other cities. Of course, this doesn't mean that the area it occupies will be smaller, but its political status will be lower. As for the area of the city, I think it can be bigger. After all, there are hundreds of thousands of people from the northeast Mongolian tribe. In this regard, the beginning city can't compare. Hearing this, Yuan had an idea in his heart. As long as the status was not the same as the beginning city was still the big brother. Some of the management personnel there could be transferred from the beginning city. It was not considered overstepping his authority. Alright, if that's the case, the city lord's mansion can send out 100 management personnel. They all started from the bottom and worked their way up step by step. In the past year, they have fully demonstrated their abilities. There are many good seedlings among them, especially my Deputy City Lord Mao Xiang, who is a very capable person. Mao Xiang? Yang Chendong nodded after hearing this. He had seen this person many times and heard more about his story. He was born a Han Chinese and had once been a scholar. However, because of the war in the place where he was brought to Crimson City by Ling Song, who had gone to the south of the Great Ming Dynasty, which had not been divided at that time. This person was actually interested in Ling Feng and worked hard to exercise his body. He failed the first assessment but succeeded the second time. Unexpectedly, he was then chosen by the new city lord of Crimson City, Yu Qian, and transferred to the city lord's mansion to work. After that, he followed Yu Mian to the beginning city and performed very well. Thinking about it, if his performance was mediocre, how could Yu Mian stand out to recommend him? One had to know that this recommendation was lifelong. In other words, if there was a problem with Mao Xiang in the future, Yu Mian would have to take responsibility. Originally, Yang Chendong wanted Yu Mian to recommend a city lord. It was impossible for Crimson City to recommend every talent. The climate and customs of the two places were different. The recommended person would have to adapt for a period of time. This was not conducive to North Desert City, which was eager to start work. Now that Yu Mian had taken the initiative to recommend him, Yang Chendong nodded. Okay, let me come over later. I will meet him. This meant that there was a chance. Yu Mian immediately said that he would do it when he returned. Now that there was a candidate for the city lord, Wang Si was unwilling to give in. He immediately proposed a candidate for the North Desert City Academy. There was no doubt that these two were promoting their own people in order to expand their speaking rights. It was still the same saying, where there were people, there would be conflicts. This was something that even Yang Chendong could not stop. He only wanted these recommended candidates to be suitable. As for some private conflicts, as long as it did not affect the overall situation and work, he would not casually intervene. Just like how he treated Yu Mian's candidate, Yang Chendong said that he also wanted to meet the candidate recommended by Wang Si. The matter was basically settled like this. Then, as the city lord, Yu Mian reported some practical materials that could support the construction of North Desert City. On this point, he did not mean to hide it. North Desert City was a lower political treatment than the beginning city. The stronger it was, the happier Yu Mian would be. Not long after meeting Yu Mian and Wang Si, Yang Chendong summoned the director of the security bureau stationed in the beginning city, Feng Liang. He expressed his worries about the North Desert region and requested to immediately build a public branch of the security bureau there. It was initially designated as a group. In the future, after the construction of the city had been completed and after work achievements, he could consider to be promoted to deputy director. He still had to accept the leadership of Feng Liang. Mao Xiang and the others were then met by Yang Chendong one by one. They talked about some practical work and future plans. These people came prepared and already had a series of plans in their hearts. In Yang Chendong's heart, he was quite satisfied. With the group in place, the next step was the mobilization of personnel and the transportation of materials. As a result, the construction of North Desert City officially began. With the full support of the various tribes in North Desert, it was done in a hurry. At the same time, preparations were also made for Yang Chendong and Tuoya's wedding. According to Princess Tuoya's intentions, she was in a hurry to get married, especially when she knew that the 5 wives of the war god had yet to give birth to a child. She wanted to take the lead even more, so she found someone to look at the date in private. It was set to be the 1st of the 7th month, more than 20 days later, for her wedding with Yang Chendong in the origin city. In order to expand the influence this time, Tuoya personally asked for instructions from Yang Chendong. When the news was released, she also claimed that on that day, the war god would be established with the title of Heaven Khan and completely inherit the ruling power of the entire North Desert Mongol tribe. When the news came out, all the forces in this area were shocked. First of all, the small leaders of the North Desert Mongol tribe. Although the title of Heaven Khan was not discussed with them before, it made them unhappy. However, considering the practical benefits in front of them, the construction of North Desert City had already begun. The workers here were all paid daily. The shining silver fell into the hands of the people of the tribe just like that. They had already won a large number of people's hearts. Even if they wanted to come out and stop it now, it was impossible, so they could only let it go. Not only that, on July 1st, they also had to consider going to the beginning city and take out their gifts to show their loyalty. At the same time, Shi Wanshan, who was currently in Talu City, also received the news. He was currently in charge of the Xian residence and the commander of the capital department of Wanquan. In his study, he sat quietly for a long time. Yang Chendong was actually going to receive the title of Heaven Khan, and at the same time take over the entire North Desert Mongol tribe. Because his wife was Princess Tuoya, their children would have the golden bloodline of the Mongol tribe. One could imagine their appeal in the future. All these things made him very anxious. The more Yang Chendong's power increased, the greater the pressure on Baiming. It could be imagined that if this kind of power was allowed to grow, it was likely that in the near future, a powerful enemy would appear in Baiming. Unfortunately, Baiming's imperial court seemed to have chosen to turn a blind eye to this situation. The new army that the imperial court was currently training was prepared to unify the great Ming dynasty. They were preparing to attack the southern Ming dynasty. This was the policy of the higher-ups. Shi Wanshan's words carried little weight. The only thing he could do was to be on good terms with Yang Chendong as much as possible and maintain the normal situation in the northwest. Shi Wanshan quickly made a decision. He would submit a memorial to the imperial court to ask if he could represent Baiming in congratulating the Duke of Zhongdan on his wedding. Since he could not fight, he could only think of a way to be on good terms with him. Chapter 879. Unlike the Mongolian tribe and Shi Wanshan who had no choice but to express goodwill, there were also the Sanbur province and Jingzhou province south of Tulu city. They were all under the banner of the great Khan of Wara. After receiving the news, they immediately sent the news out. Although they could barely protect themselves with their forces and did not want to provoke the mercenaries and the powerful god of war now, the other party wanted to be conferred the title of Heaven Khan. In history, only a few people like Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shimin, and Genghis Khan could enjoy the title. Now that Yang Chendong wanted to take it for himself, they had no choice but to report such a big matter. As for what the higher-ups wanted to do, it was not something they could worry about. In the beginning city, Tuoya acted first and reported later and created the title of Heaven Khan. Yang Chendong did not know about it at the first moment. If Yang Chendong was the Heaven Khan, then once he had a son with Tuoya, wouldn't he also have a high status? On this point, Tuoya had her own selfish motives. Yang Chendong was well aware of this point, but he did not point it out. Although this title could be said to be a tall tree attracting the wind and would bring unknown consequences and become the target of public criticism, he was not afraid or worried about the powerful mercenaries. Alright, Heavenly Khan it is. Send a report to the madams in Qiqian City and give a detailed introduction of the situation here. Yang Chendong stood under the moon in the small courtyard and said to the servant Yang Lu who was following beside him. In his eyes, the influence of a Heaven Khan was far less important than explaining to his madams. Yang Lu sighed at the young master's powerful thinking. After agreeing, he turned around and did it. The god of war, the Duke of Loyalty of the Great Ming, the messenger of Tingri Heaven, the future Heaven Khan of the grassland was going to marry the princess of the Golden Family. This news quickly made the beginning city boil with excitement. The people in the city who had benefited from it hung red lanterns in every house, and the entire street was cleaned up. They expressed their congratulations to Yang Chendong in this way. As the day approached, more and more people rushed to the beginning city to watch this grand ceremony. Among them was Chief Commander Shi Wanshan, who had received the imperial court's reply and had come to the beginning city to express his goodwill. Therefore, the inns in the city were overcrowded. Some people also took the opportunity to clean up their houses to entertain the guests. During this period, they made a small profit. Although the beginning city lord's mansion to collect taxes, compared to the profit, the people were still very happy. If there were happy people, there would be some people who were unhappy. For example, Tua Buhua, who received the news. Yang Chendong's appearance changed history, and also changed the trajectory of some people's lives. Tua Hua was one of them. Tua Buhua's full name was Buer Tua Buhua. He was betrayed by his younger brother Agar Dorji and defeated by Yeshen. However, he was still alive. Not only that, because Yeshen's main goal was to deal with the Baiming Datong prefecture, he had the opportunity to develop. Now, he had 30,000 elite cavalry and 50,000 ordinary cavalry. Previously, Hubo was his subordinate. He originally wanted to integrate the Tatar cavalry near Tulu city to strengthen his own strength. However, he did not expect that he would lose to the combination of the mercenaries and the Baiming army so quickly. Just as he was thinking about whether to take revenge immediately, the news of Yang Chendong marrying the princess of the Golden Family and becoming the Heaven Khan spread. This time, Tua Buhua could not take it anymore. He immediately called Hubo and the other generals to discuss the matter of marching into the beginning city. The appearance of the beginning city had greatly affected the Tatar Empire's ruling position in this region. The fact that Yang Chendong wanted to become the Heaven Khan had directly affected his authority. Just these 2 points alone made them like fire and water. A battle was unavoidable. Within the huge yurt, Tua Buhua ordered Hubo and another general, Lakshan, to split into the left and right vanguards. They each brought 20,000 troops to head towards the beginning city. Menk was the lieutenant general, and he brought 30,000 elite cavalry and 10,000 Mongol cavalry to follow behind. They wanted to take down the beginning city in one battle and completely defeat the Heaven Khan. The war was just a means to continue the political appeal. Rather than saying that Tua Buhua hated Yang Chendong for calling himself the Heaven Khan, it was better to say that he took a fancy to the resources and geographical location of the beginning city. In the current beginning city, there were close to 300,000 civilians. Out of which, 230,000 had just come from Chichen City. Perhaps some of them would quickly rush over to North Desert City, but 300,000 civilians was still a number that could be guaranteed. The first city was huge, and the city was bustling. When many goods from Chichen City arrived here, it became the largest trading base in the grassland. As long as one had money, one could buy many things that could not be bought outside, or even things that one did not dare to think about before. Because of this, it attracted the patronage of Northern Ming, Gandusi, the nearby Mongolian merchants, and some merchants from Siberia in the northwest. It was rumored that just the number of transactions in the city each day was a shocking number. No matter who occupied this place, just by collecting taxes, they would be able to obtain unimaginable benefits. Outside the city, there were nearly 300,000 mu of grain fields. Even during winter, there was a supply of vegetables. Outside the city, there was also the largest livestock farm in Mongolia. It was said that the mercenaries spent 3 million taels of silver to build it. There were more than 200,000 healthy horses and countless lambs. With so many resources, no matter who could hold them in their hands, they could quickly strengthen themselves and complete their goal of dominating the grasslands. Such a place naturally attracted the envy of countless people. If it weren't for the fact that the mercenaries were too powerful, they would have won many battles despite being outnumbered, causing the nearby forces to behave themselves. Otherwise, the flames of war would have been incessant every day. With so many benefits, it was not strange that Tua had taken a fancy to this place. When his army was heading to the beginning city area, they even passed by the Hetao area where the Walla leader, Yes Hen, was located, causing the other party to be on guard early on. However, Tua did not care at all. It was as if he did not see his enemy, Yes Hen. He actually passed by and did not even have the intention to fight. This was politics. There were only interests, no right or wrong, and it rarely involved hatred. Otherwise, Tuachuo would have targeted Yes Hen, who had stabbed him before, instead of the mercenary who was always on the defensive. The 80,000-strong army walked through countless places in the grassland, attracting the attention of various big and small forces. As the 80,000-strong cavalry moved, the focus of the entire grassland naturally fell on the first city area. Everyone knew that this would be a decisive battle between the old and new overlords. After this battle, the ownership of the origin city region would be determined. After this battle, the victorious party would have a firm foothold in this region and it would be difficult to shake it. In the beginning city, the intelligence of the Security Bureau had been sent here earlier. The news of Tua leading 80,000-strong cavalry to the beginning city had spread to everyone in the city. Shi Wanshan, who was staying in the guest house at the beginning of the city, also heard the news. Then he sent people to inquire about the reactions of the people in the city. This would play an extremely important role in his analysis of the victory or defeat of this battle. The people he sent out quickly replied. Unfortunately, the news they brought back made Shi Wanshan very disappointed. In the entire city, there was not the slightest panic on the faces of the people. Everyone was doing what they were supposed to do. It seemed that no one took Tuo's 80,000-strong cavalry seriously. Or perhaps they had already experienced a lot. At the beginning, there were 50,000-strong cavalry from the Agador tribe, then there were 40,000-strong cavalry from the Hubo, tribe, 10,000 infantrymen from the Northern Desert tribe. There were also tens of thousands of people from the Northern Desert Tribe Alliance. Each of them was aggressive when they came, but it did not take long before they were defeated and fled. Many people did not even have the ability to escape and eventually lost their lives here. On the other hand, the more the mercenaries fought, the more powerful they became. Right now, it was only 80,000 steel cavalry. What did that amount to? So what if she couldn't get rid of it? In the past, the Tatar tribe was very powerful and even had the intention of unifying the grassland, but that was in the past after all. With the rise of the War of Wara, especially when Yes Hen teamed up with Agador to take down Tuabuhua, the invincible aura around him had long since disappeared, and everyone was no longer afraid of him. According to the report of the spies sent out, there was not the slightest bit of chaos in the entire origin city because of this news. If one had to say who was influential, it would be the adult men among the common people. They longed for war because only then would they have the opportunity to join the army. It should be known that the treatment of mercenaries in the entire prairie was second to none when compared to the great Ming dynasty. A soldier could support his entire family. This was not just a slogan, but a reality. If one could achieve military merits in battle and become an officer, their treatment would be even better. Even if they were unfortunate enough to die in battle, the compensation given to them would be an astronomical sum. In the past, when they fought for the other Mongolian tribes, they would dig a hole and bury them whenever they died. Some would even set fire to their graves. Their families would also be bullied or become slaves because of this. The attitude of the mercenaries towards Junlai was many times better. It was precisely because the mercenaries treated their soldiers so well that it affected the nearby Mongolian tribes. They were all fighting on horseback, but the treatment was so different. Many people wanted to be treated the same. In the end, the leaders of the tribes could only watch as their cavalry left them and joined the powerful mercenary family. Chapter 880. Listening to the news brought back by the spy, Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng, who was traveling with him, both had sighing expressions on their faces. Looking at the treatment of the mercenaries and the treatment of the Baiming soldiers, it was not an exaggeration to say that the difference was like heaven and earth. The Xian mansion was slightly better. At least, Shi Wanshan did not deduct too much from the soldiers' wages. Most of the soldiers were still able to live a good life. Compared to some other places, the army was still mainly military households. Every year, they would only be given a small amount of land, and they would only collect less rent. They could not even see a fight for their wages, so why would they have to risk their lives during a war? Different people have different lives. This kind of army is far from something we can defeat, unless... Ning Wenfeng sighed. Unless what? Shi Wanshan asked with a glimmer of hope. Unless the mercenaries have no money and are unable to support such a huge military expenditure. Then, the army may fall into chaos without fighting, and that will be our chance. It's just that the financial resources of the mercenaries, sigh. When Ning Wenfeng said this, he sighed. There were some things that he could only think about. Not to mention other things, just based on the income from the greenhouses in the winter of the first city, who knew how much money they could earn from the fresh vegetables they sold. Shi Wanshan had thought of imitating this before, but where the greenhouses came from and how much money they would need to make them were big problems. More importantly, once these greenhouses were really made, the income would belong to the officials of the Baiming imperial court before the Xian mansion and the Yuan all department could think about it. If that was the case, wouldn't it be making a wedding dress for others? No one was willing to do something that did not bring them any benefits. Shi Wanshan could only dismiss this idea. Now that he heard Ning Wenfeng say that unless the mercenaries had financial problems, perhaps their opportunity would appear. He shook his head and said, "This problem will not appear for the time being. I'm afraid you already know that the mercenaries have a large military base on Wuxia Island. I think the development there is far beyond our imagination. How much money can be made from the things produced there is not something you or I can imagine." With the arrival of 200,000 Han people and 30,000 educated youths in the first city, the problem of the Qiqian city was no longer a secret. Some legends about it could be heard on the streets and alleys. For example, there was an electric light that could shine at night as if it was daytime. It was something that people who had never been there could not imagine. The news was leaked, and there was nothing they could do about it. After all, there were 200,000 people, and no one could guarantee that they were all people who kept secrets. In addition to the temptation of spies from various parties, the news was quickly spread out. Regarding this matter, Director Feng Liang first caught a few people. After realizing that it was useless, he asked for instructions from Yang Chendong. Then, the Security Bureau began to release all kinds of news. For example, there was an Immortal's aura above Qiqian city, which supported the city during the day and night. For example, there was gold and silver placed on the streets of Qiqian city, but no one went to pick them up. There was also news that the mercenaries' barracks in the city were about to set up cannons, but there was no space for them. Some people were simply squeezed into the sea, and so on. In short, there was all kinds of news. It became more and more mysterious, and more unbelievable. In the end, other than learning that the mercenaries' headquarters might be built on Wuxia Island, there was not a single piece of useful news. Shi Wanshan sighed. Ning Wenfeng also could not think of any good ideas. The two of them stared at each other, sighing that they were born at the wrong time. They even faintly worried about Baiming's future. A few streets away from the guest house, the Yang mansion, as the most mysterious and most respected existence in the beginning city, was also holding a meeting at this moment. They were discussing how to fight against Tuachuo Huahua's 80,000 troops. "Bandits, they're all bandits," one of the participants, beginning city Lord Yu Qian, said angrily. It was no wonder that he was so angry. This time, Tuachuo Huahua personally led an army here. He even brought the elite of the Tatar cavalry. On the surface, it seemed that he was dissatisfied with the sixth young master's performance of being conferred the title of Heavenly Khan, but in fact, it was just an excuse for him to occupy this place by force. Everything that beginning city had now did not come from the wind. It was built with the efforts of countless people and a huge amount of money. Even now, it seemed that there were many ways to earn income in beginning city, such as business tax, local tax, house rent, greenhouse vegetables, large horse and sheep farms, and so on. In fact, there was still a huge difference compared to the investment. According to the sixth young master's earliest plan, it was already very good to be able to break even within 3 years. This was also because beginning city was the first big city on the grassland and had many innate conditions. Once the number of cities increased, there would be some impact on each other. At that time, if one wanted to build a city to break even or even start to make money, it would probably take 5 years. So much money and effort had been invested. Now that beginning city's situation had begun to improve and prosper, there were immediately people who had ideas about it. It was no wonder that the bookish Yuan would be so angry. He had always treated beginning city as his own child. Yes, they've taken a fancy to beginning city's position and various resources. They started the war to plunder it. If they really occupy this place, I'm afraid it won't take long for this place to return to the desolate Alahumaki city of the past. Beginning City Academy's dean, Wang Si, also chimed in. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and chuckled. Dean Wang, what are you laughing at? Yuan asked with a puzzled expression. Oh, it's nothing. I heard that there's another reason why Tuachuobuhua wants to enter beginning city. It's said that the sixth young master is disrespectful to Genghis Khan. They said that he once used a poem to say that Genghis Khan, the prodigy of the generation, only knew how to shoot a big eagle with a bow. They said that this was the sixth young master's metaphor that their ancestor only knew how to shoot birds with a bow. Ha ha ha. At this point, Wang Si could no longer control himself. He could not help but hold his stomach and laugh out loud in such a serious meeting. Not only him, but many people in the meeting also laughed at this moment. The original meaning of this was that the sixth young master said that Genghis Khan was brave but not astute. However, it was interpreted this way. However, it did not seem to be wrong on the surface. Yang Chendong, who was sitting at the head of the table, also chuckled. Then, he gently raised his right arm. Immediately, the meeting became incomparably quiet. All right, there's no need to talk about robbers. I've said long ago that in this world, sometimes it's useless to reason. In the end, it still depends on who has the biggest fist. That's the hard truth. As the saying goes, we'll deal with whatever comes our way. Since Tuachuobuhua wants to court death, we'll fulfill their wish. Tiger's Mane, how's the training of the new army going? Tiger's Mane, who was the only one with the rank of Major General, stood up. Young Master, the situation is very good. The general trend is irresistible. Nowadays, there are too many young men from the grasslands who want to join the mercenary army. This is where the pressure lies. It's not easy to join the army and occupy a spot. In order not to lose it, all the soldiers are working hard to train. No one dares to be lazy, for fear of being squeezed out by others. Good, it's best to be able to train independently. Only if you're truly willing can the trained army be a strong, iron army, an invincible army. Yang Chendong nodded in satisfaction after hearing this. Then, he looked at Beta Persei on the other side and asked, how's the logistics division? How many recruits are training now? How many captives can be sent to the battlefield immediately? How many reserve soldiers are available? Young Master, the logistics division now has 10,000 recruits training. In half a month, the first stage will basically be over. In another month, most of the training procedures will be completed and they can be considered to officially enter the army. There are 15,000 captives, all of whom are the kind who can fight on the battlefield at any time. In the reserve, there are 10,000 young men from the grasslands. Usually, they mainly focus on learning Chinese and writing. At the same time, they are also responsible for reclaiming grain fields and doing construction work in the city. This is also a way to train their brain and physical strength. Once they pass the initial assessment, they can transfer to the recruit area for training at any time and wait for the opportunity to add to the army. Well, 35,000 people. That's not a small number. Yang Chendong was also quite satisfied with the logistics division's work. Logically speaking, as long as he was willing, he could form another army now. However, considering the financial pressure, he gave up this idea. The treatment of mercenary soldiers was very high, even a little too high. Once the number of troops was too high, the pressure on the city lord's mansion would increase. This was not in line with Yang Chendong's initial requirements of controlling the army with one hand and controlling the economy with the other. Okay, don't recruit new soldiers for the time being. After this battle, we'll replenish according to the actual situation. Yang Chendong ordered Beta Persei, then looked at the others and said, just last night, Yang Si, who is building Mabe City, sent a message saying that the Mongolian tribes in Mabe City are willing to contribute to the resistance of Tuachuo Buhua's provocation. They said that they can send 20,000 troops. They also said that they don't need to be paid, nor do they need to be equipped with horses and sabers. As long as they make military contributions on the battlefield, they will be rewarded according to the standards of mercenaries. If they are unfortunate enough to die in battle, they will still be compensated according to the mercenary standards. However, considering that their overall quality may be far inferior to the mercenaries, they only want half of our soldiers' compensation. Everyone, let's talk about your opinions. There's no need for that. As soon as Yang Chendong finished speaking, everyone at the meeting started to talk. Chapter 881. Other than Yu Mian, Wang Si, and Feng Liang, who held authority in certain areas, those who were qualified to participate in this meeting were the backbone of some divisions and regiments. Seeing that a big battle was about to be fought and the time to gain merit had arrived, it would be strange if they didn't like someone who suddenly wanted to take a share of the loot. All the officers were talking at once. Yang Chendong smiled but didn't say anything. He only held his tea and slowly drank it. His gaze would occasionally look at the faces of the other officers, observing their every move. Among these people, there was one person who had a very special status. He was Fan Yuhai's former subordinate, Lu Duo. In the battle, Fan Yuhai and Zhang Meng had both died, leaving only Lu Duo behind. It had to be said that this person was also a staunch person. He tried to commit suicide several times, but was always found and saved under the special protection of the mercenaries. After this matter was reported to Yang Chendong, the two of them had a long talk. Lu Duo, I know you hate me and don't want to serve in the mercenary army, but I think you must be more curious about why Fan Yuhai lost to me. I'll give you a chance now. You cannot be considered a mercenary, but some meetings allow people to participate. You can watch all of this as a third party and find your answer. If one day you find your answer and still want to seek death, then I won't stop you. How about it? After this conversation, Lu Duo appeared in this meeting with a transcendent status. He had seen everyone's performance just now. When he heard that someone wanted to gain merit, although he didn't say anything, he agreed in his heart. Since the battle was imminent and the military merits were in front of him, why would he let others do it? This was equivalent to snatching meat from his bowl. If he was a regiment commander or even a division commander, he would definitely oppose it. Not only did he think this way, but he also thought that Yang Chendong also had the same thoughts. He even guessed why this person would bring up this matter. He must be using this to tell everyone that there were many troops who wanted to participate in the battle. If they didn't perform well on the battlefield, then they couldn't blame others for snatching their merits. This was just a way to motivate the generals and soldiers. In the past, Fan Yuhai had often used it, so it was not surprising. Lu Duo also did not think that Yang Chendong would be more skilled in this aspect, much better than his former master. In the meeting, the generals were still talking at the same time. However, all of them expressed that it was enough to have them on the battlefield. As for the 20,000 Mongol soldiers, they should just forget about it. The benefits should not be given to outsiders, right? After a while, those who should have expressed their opinions had all expressed their opinions. Even the Tatar division commander, Su He, who rarely spoke, firmly said that they could fight this battle well. If they didn't have enough troops, they could use the logistics division's troops. There was no need for others to interfere. Soon, apart from Commander Tiger's Mane and Deputy Commander Shibi, the rest of the officers made their statements. Everyone is almost done talking. Why aren't Commander Hu and Deputy Commander Shi speaking? What do you think? Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the abilities of these two people. As they continued to grow, they had become more and more like high-ranking generals. They were not anxious when faced with problems, and they were calm and mature. The two people who were called looked at each other first. Then, Tiger's Mane, as the representative, smiled and said, "Young master, since you said so, you must have thought about the overall situation. We will listen to you." "Good." Yang Chendong nodded heavily. Then, he looked at the audience and said, "I mean that we can agree to their request and allow them to send 20,000 people to participate in the battle." Sixth Young Master. Hearing Yang Chendong's decision, the officers all said with ugly expressions. Even Lu Duo, who was not wearing a military uniform and did not have any military rank, widened his eyes at this moment. He suddenly realized that he still didn't understand this loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty. Yang Chendong gestured for everyone to not be anxious. Then, he said, "I understand what you mean and what you think. However, there is only one thing I want to say. That is, people will die in war. Although both sides are flesh and blood, the mercenaries are like my children. Of course, I will side with you. If we win this battle with too many casualties, that is not what I want. Since they have joined the mercenary group, that in itself is a kind of trust in us. Trust is easy to say, but it can only be barely achieved after countless efforts. Since they trust us, we should be responsible for their lives. If we can avoid death, we should avoid death. If we can avoid death, we should avoid death. Therefore, the addition of these 20,000 people will greatly reduce the pressure on us. In some bloody battles, we can even let them fight. This can reduce our casualties to a minimum, and it can also tell others that it is not so easy to take advantage of us. What do you all think?" Allowing others to participate in the battle did mean that they had to share a part of the military merits. However, it was undeniable that they would also share a part of the danger. If the plan was meticulous, they might even share a large part of the danger. This was Yang Chendong's consideration for everyone. When these words were said in public, the people who had objected just now could not help but shut their mouths. This was for their own good. They could not refuse. When everyone looked at Yang Chendong, their eyes were filled with gratitude. Lu Duo finally understood Yang Chendong's meaning. He sighed in his heart. This person was indeed ruthless. Compared to him, Fan Yuhai was not as good. However, from another point of view, was his consideration wrong? This time, the people of the Mongol tribe in the desert wanted to take advantage of them. If they refused, it was inevitable that people would say that they were not impartial. However, they originally wanted to force Yang Chendong to give in. In the end, they were used. Who could be blamed for this? Of course, what made Lu Duo sigh was that Yang Chendong valued the lives of the soldiers. How could this kind of leader who sincerely thought for the soldiers not be respected? What if he could not be supported by others? When he looked at Yang Chendong, Lu Duo seemed to see a faint halo above his head. That was something that only people who achieved great things would have. In comparison, whether it was the angle of looking at the problem or the situation, Fan Yuhai lost by more than a level. Now, it seemed that they would lose and Yang Chendong would win. Everything seemed to be within reason. The meeting was still going on. In the end, 3 sets of plans were drawn up. Because they still didn't know how the Tatar cavalry was going to fight this battle, the plans could be changed at any time. However, it was undeniable that all the participants were convinced after listening to Yang Chendong's 3 sets of plans. The various calculations were in place and were made according to the character of the enemy's generals. It already included all kinds of possibilities. Military preparations had to be done. The matter of Yang Chendong marrying Princess Tuoya and conferring the title of Khan still had to be carried out. This matter was mainly handed over to Yu Mian, Wang Si, and the others to handle. According to the requirements, this ceremony had to be grand and had to have the effect of encouraging and unifying the people. The 1st of July quickly arrived under everyone's expectations. In the morning of this day, the entire first city was infected by the enthusiastic atmosphere. All the people in the city, regardless of age, walked to the streets and came to the largest central square in the city. There was also such a square in Qiqian City. It could accommodate more than 300,000 people and the army. It had already become a kind of landmark building in Yangxia City. Princess Tuoya was already dressed up. She was wearing gold and silver accessories. It was estimated that the weight of these accessories was no less than 10 kilograms. It was so heavy that she felt like she could not lift her head. With the help of her maid Guna, after Fan Yuqi was defeated, Guna who was imprisoned was freed, she came to an extremely luxurious carriage. Then, she rushed to the central square with Yang Chendong, who was wearing a marshal's uniform. 2nd Madame Qiao Yin, 4th Madame Lady Xiang, and 7th Madame Yang Nai had already arrived at the square. According to the 2 madams, they did not want to show their faces in public at this time. The main reason was that they did not want to steal the limelight from the 7th madam. However, Yang Chendong insisted that they come. He also used this matter to tell others that he would not forget his old love after marrying a new one. Similarly, when it came to military matters, he wouldn't forget about the old just because he used new people. At this moment, the square was already crowded. When Yang Chendong's carriage appeared, the square was even more jubilant. The sound of shouting the heavenly Khan shook the sky. It could be heard clearly in every corner of the first city. The carriage stopped. Yang Chendong appeared in the crowd's line of sight, holding the hand of Tuoya, who was dressed in splendid clothes. He waved to everyone from time to time. For a moment, the waves of cheers were louder than the previous. At this moment, everyone was immersed in the warm atmosphere. Among the crowd, the spies of the Security Bureau were dispatched collectively. They appeared in the crowd and watched every place in the square at all times to ensure that they could counterattack immediately if there was any movement. Amidst the cheers of more than 200,000 people, Yang Chendong walked up to the viewing platform of the square. As he made a gesture, a loud bugle sounded, followed by a grand military parade. Groups of mercenaries in military green uniforms walked out from the side of the square and strode forward on the road in front of the square. During the war, one of the best ways to announce oneself was to parade. It could not only have the effect of inspiring and grand, but it could also have the effect of deterring the enemy. Sure enough, when the military parade began, the square was much quieter. Everyone's eyes were attracted by the mercenaries walking through the square. Even Wan Shirshan, Ning Wenfeng, and the others were staring at the scene in front of them, as if they were going to miss every single moment. The first to appear was the Black Cavalry Guards. The uniform black armor, black mask, and the uniform warhorse armor gave everyone a strong sense of oppression when they appeared. Although there were only 100 people in total, the aura they revealed was not weaker than any army with thousands of men and horses. Chapter 882. The second person to walk over was the new army headquarters. Tiger's Mane, who was dressed in a general's uniform, led the way. The deputy commander and other military personnel followed behind him. Their appearance caused a burst of cheers in the square. After the military, the first group to appear was the Tatar division. After the expansion, they had 20 battalions. They appeared in formal attire and attracted a lot of shouts from the central square. The next group to appear was the recruit division. They received the most cheers because many of their relatives were the people of the origin city. With the help of their relatives, their momentum was naturally great. After the recruit division was the independent division. The division commander Xianxia and the deputy division commander Na Ri Song walked in front of the group. As the division commander, Xianxia had no chance to fight with Tua Buhua. Even if he came to attend the wedding ceremony this time, he still had to go back soon. In contrast, Na Ri Song was much more fortunate. He was lucky enough to stay and be the representative general of the Mongolian tribe in the north of the desert. He would fight the Tatar army together with the mercenaries. Their appearance attracted Yang Chendong and Tuoya, who were on the viewing platform, to wave at them. The fourth division to appear was the logistics group. They had too many people and it was impossible for all of them to appear. They only sent a part of the representatives, but they also won a lot of cheers. Especially when the propaganda group and the medical group walked through the square, it attracted a lot of attention from the Mongolian men. These two groups were mostly made up of female soldiers. Under the contrast of the military uniforms, it was the first time that the berets appeared in front of everyone. It was impossible for such a group to not attract attention. Especially the medical group, they were responsible for battlefield rescue. They were far from the propaganda group. Although the members were very beautiful, they could only be seen from afar. It was very difficult to get close to them. The medical group was different. They were responsible for treating the soldiers and the wounded on the battlefield. It was very easy to get close to them as long as they were sick. Because of this, many soldiers recently went to the medical group for various reasons. However, in reality, no one knew how many people were really sick. After the logistics group, the direct subordinate regiment, reconnaissance battalion, light cavalry regiment, heavy cavalry regiment and other regimental units appeared. However, the most eye-catching unit was still the heavy cavalry unit. Although there were only 2,000 of them, their auras were extraordinary. When they walked on the square, they caused the ground to tremble. Their shining blades caused many Mongolian girls to scream, and the Mongolian men to feel their blood boil. In their eyes, these were the strongest existences. If they could join such a group, they would be proud for the rest of their lives. After these troops walked in, the next to enter was the 20,000 cavalry of the Mongol tribe. In comparison, regardless of whether it was military discipline, or imposing manner, they were all a bit weaker. Fortunately, Princess Tuoya was waving her hands at them from the viewing platform, giving them support. Only then did they not lose so much face. These 20,000 men were the 20,000 that the Mongol tribes had requested to join the battle. Originally, they had thought that they were here to split the benefits and show their faces. However, it seemed like their appearance had caused the atmosphere to become a little awkward. But no matter what, the fact that they were able to appear here was already a victory. They originally thought that the war god might not agree to them coming out to take advantage of the situation. However, they did not expect that the war god would agree so quickly. This allowed them to feel the war god's friendly attitude, and they were determined to perform well on the battlefield. After the Mongol tribe walked in, the last to enter was the ferocious tiger regiment. Different from the cavalry, this time they walked in. All of them carried the Type 95 on their shoulders and were equipped with shining blades, making it difficult for them not to attract attention. However, what was even more unexpected was that when the 3,200 men walked in front of the viewing platform, the leader, Xiao Feng, suddenly shouted, "Look to the right." With this order, the ferocious tiger regiment soldiers who were walking in unison suddenly changed their pace. Then, they raised their spears and stabbed. Their movements were neat and uniform. Under the sunlight, the shining bayonets drew a beautiful arc in front of the 200,000+ spectators. This was a standard military parade, and only the real Leng Feng could perform this standard action. It was a pity that there was no military song to accompany it. However, the appearance of the Leng Feng ferocious tiger regiment still stirred up the atmosphere of the entire plaza. Especially when they walked behind the 20,000 Mongol tribe cavalry. Compared to their laziness, the appearance of this neat group of soldiers stood out even more. The military parade lasted for nearly 6 hours, from morning to afternoon. As the ferocious tiger regiment marched out of the square, a few large balloons suddenly appeared in the sky. Countless flowers that had been prepared beforehand scattered down from the sky, giving people the feeling that divine flowers had descended from the heavens, or that fairies were scattering flowers. On the viewing platform, Tuoya was extremely excited. She hugged Yang Chendong's arm tightly and looked up at the sky in surprise. Yang Chendong's lips were constantly curved in a smile. Behind him, second Madame Qiao Yin and fourth Madame Xiang also had looks of envy on their faces. However, they knew that this marriage had great political significance. It was not something they could be envious of. Moreover, as long as their husband treated them well, the two of them would be very satisfied. When the commoners in the plaza saw the heavenly flowers, they were all excited and excited. Many old men knelt on the ground as their knees gave way. Then, they shouted, "Long live the heavenly Khan, long live the heavenly Khan! Long live the Khan! Long live the Khan!" Very quickly, this chant spread to the entire plaza. The 200,000+ commoners and the tens of thousands of soldiers in the parade all knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, expressing their excitement at this moment. Shi Wanshan and Ning Wenfeng watched this scene from the side of the viewing platform, their eyes flashing with deep worry. However, when they saw everyone kneeling on the ground, even the leaders of the Mongol tribes had no choice but to kneel on the ground and chant the slogan. The two of them standing there were extremely eye-catching. Squat down. At the critical moment, Shi Wanshan reacted quickly. He was Baiming's minister, so naturally, he could not easily kneel to others. However, at this time, squatting was still possible. In this way, although they were somewhat unwilling, the two of them still squatted in the crowd. Although their knees did not touch the ground, on the surface, there was no difference between them and the crowd. And this scene was captured by two students from the First City Academy who were good at photography. They had received the digital camera the day before yesterday. The two of them were amazed by this good thing that could completely freeze the image taken with a press of a button. No one knew where this thing came from, but it seemed that there were too many secrets that happened to the sixth young master. There were so many secrets that if he took out a plane that could fly now, everyone would not be too surprised other than exclaiming in admiration. In the crowd's loud cheers for the Khan, Yang Chendong and Tuoya walked down the viewing platform and went straight to the Yang mansion. The next thing to do was to hold a banquet. In the courtyard of the Yang mansion, there were already 10 tables of wine. Of course, this was for the high-level personnel. As for the others, they would be accompanied by other officials in the city lord's mansion, the first city guest house, and other places. A lively day would always come to an end. That night, all the guests walked out of the Yang mansion in satisfaction when they were drunk. Yang Chendong, who was still full of energy, also strode into his bridal chamber. There, Princess Tuoya was waiting for him, waiting for the happiest moment of his life to come. On the second day of the wedding ceremony, the guests began to leave one after another, and the parade troops also went to the front line one after another. They originally had their own missions, and if one looked carefully, they would notice that some of the troops that left the city were mainly heading toward the Saihan mountain area, which was southeast of the first city. Just yesterday, before the ceremony was about to begin, the Security Bureau and the reconnaissance team, which was under Su Yunqing's command, sent news that the 20,000 cavalrymen under the Tatar army's right vanguard, Lakshan, had arrived at the foot of Saihan mountain. They revealed that they wanted to capture this mountain and use it as their rear base to confront the mercenaries. According to the previous plan, the logistics division had originally sent out 6 battalions of more than 2,000 people to guard Saihan Mountain. However, because they had entered the city to participate in the parade, only 1 battalion was left to guard the mountain. Coincidentally, at this moment, the Tatar army appeared at the foot of the mountain. The troops that were leaving the city were rushing to support them. On the magnetite slope halfway up Saihan Mountain, General Lakshan was looking up at the peak of the mountain with a complacent expression. After receiving the order from Great Khan Tuachuo Buhua to attack the first city, Lakshan rushed all the way here. He wanted to arrive before the great Ming dynasty's Zhongdan Duke's wedding and sabotage it. However, he was still late by a day. The enemies that obstructed them along the way were really troublesome, making it impossible for them to arrive at the first city on time. But it didn't matter. The Tatar spies left behind in this area brought him good news. There weren't many enemies in Mount Saihan that the mercenaries had taken down. There were only a few hundred of them even if they were to take all of them into account. 20,000 versus a few hundred. This was an unequal battle. To Lakshan, it was like an appetizer before a big meal. He did not care about it at all. The facts also proved that the magnetite slope halfway up the mountain was taken down without much attack. Next, they only had to wait until they reached the peak of Saihan Mountain. Then, this place would be completely under their control. Report. A large number of mercenary reinforcements have been discovered at the foot of the mountain. When the news reached Lakshan's ears, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Good, they're pretty fast. Since this is the case, let's work together from the inside and the outside. Inform everyone not to rush to attack the mountain. Let the troops come up and immediately send someone to inform General Hubo, to quickly move down the mountain. We need to work together from the inside and the outside to take down this wave of enemies. Chapter 883. The scout nodded and immediately went to pass down the order. Another deputy general, Mu Chi, came up with a puzzled expression. General, why should we stop attacking the mountain? The enemy is here, so we should attack with all our might. There are people on the mountain, and we are now halfway up the mountain. This is very disadvantageous for us. Ha ha ha, what do you know? Lakshan had a smug look on his face when he said this. Mu Chi flattered and laughed. He took half a step forward and said, General, please enlighten us so that we can learn from you. Looking at Mu Chi's curious face, Lakshan's vanity was greatly satisfied. He laughed and said, all right, seeing that you are so eager to learn, I will teach you a lesson today. Let me ask you, why did the mercenaries rush to our Saihan Mountain so early in the morning? Well, it's probably because they know that there are mercenaries surrounded here, so they want to take this place back. Mu Chi answered with a straight to the point. That's right. Then if we had already taken over the entire mountain, do you think they would still want to take it back? Lakshan chuckled and patted Mu Chi's shoulder. Let me tell you, war is a skill. Sometimes, bravery alone is not enough. There are still many things to learn. Lakshan had already left, but Mu Chi was still deep in thought. Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration and shouted, ah! I know, the general intentionally left the mountain unattacked in order to lure the enemy's reinforcements. Only if there are mercenaries here would they have no choice but to come despite knowing the danger. That's right, the enemy on the mountain is the bait we use to catch the big fish. If we eat them now, the mercenaries won't fall for it. Ha ha ha. Now, we just have to wait for them to reach the foot of the mountain and wait for General Hubo, to surround them. Then, we can eat the bait at any time and attack from both inside and outside to deal a heavy blow to the mercenaries. Lakshan, who was already a few meters away, laughed heartily and walked further and further away. He wanted to see how many reinforcements the mercenaries had. If there were too few, it wouldn't be enough for him to eat. At this moment, Hu Bo-er's 20,000 soldiers were rushing over from the west of Saihan Mountain. Hu Bo-er, who was riding on a horse, asked General Mu Ren as she galloped. Did Lakshan really take down Mount Saihan? Yes, the scouts they sent, as well as the gerfalcons in the sky, told us the same thing. Mu Ren answered with certainty. Then are you sure that there's only one battalion of mercenaries on Saihan Mountain? Hu Bo-er asked worriedly. I saw it clearly. Usually, there are only 4 battalions on the mountain. Our brothers went to investigate before. This time, for the wedding of Duke Zhongdan, they sent 3 battalions to participate in the military parade. Now there is only 1 battalion left in the mountain. Mu Ren nodded again and said. This Mount Saihan is such an important place. How could it change hands so easily? General Mu Ren, do you think this is another one of Duke Zhongdan's schemes? Hu Bo-er was still worried and continued to ask. That shouldn't be the case. Our men just sent a report from the origin city. They said that Duke Zhongdan's main generals appeared during the military parade. If they were really prepared, then there should be at least 1 general guarding an important place like Mount Saihan. Mu Ren replied while sighing in his heart. It seemed that his general was scared after the previous defeat. Otherwise, why would he be so careful? Is that so? That's good, that's good. After asking a few questions and not finding any problems, Hu Bo-er finally relaxed. She then said to a guard beside her, Go and inform General Hu Lin of the vanguard. Tell him to speed up. As long as we report to him, even if the mercenaries have some tricks up their sleeves, it won't be that easy for them to take down our army of 40,000. Hu Bo-er was very careful. As the saying goes, once bitten by a snake, twice shy. This was exactly what he meant. He was worried that Yang Chendong would play tricks again, so he wanted to be closer to Lakshan. That way, if the situation changed, he would be able to provide assistance. However, he did not know that this was exactly what his opponent did not want to see. On the battlefield, only by not letting the opponent feel comfortable would one feel comfortable. This was a principle that had not changed since the ancient times. As such, when Hu Bo-er's troops wanted to get closer to Mount Saihan, they encountered more and more resistance. There were a total of 10,000 Mongol soldiers in this region. The vanguard general Hu Lin had already encountered many waves of enemies, ranging from a few hundred to a few thousand. Fortunately, the other party's combat strength was very ordinary, and most of the time, they used arrows to attack from afar. Once he became serious and launched a charge, the other party would retreat again, as if they had no intention of tangling with them. It was also as if their combat strength was mediocre, and it was difficult for them to be a match. This situation was somewhat abnormal, so Hu Lin sent someone to report the situation to General Hu Bo-er. Very quickly, he received a confirmation. Don't worry about them. They just want to stop us from meeting up with General Lakshan. The more they do this, the faster we need to get to the foot of Mount Saihan. With this order, Hu Lin calmed down and ordered the vanguard to charge forward. When they met with obstructions, they would only send out a small group of cavalry to retaliate. As expected, even a small group of cavalry was able to repel the enemies. Hence, they continued to charge forward. When the sky was about to turn dark, they were already 20 li west of the foot of Mount Saihan. From here to the foot of the mountain, it would only take an hour. The cavalry had been running for an entire day and were truly tired. After asking for instructions, Hu Lin ordered the troops to rest. In less than an hour, General Hu Bo-er and General Mu Ren arrived, and both sides met up. Good, everyone is tired. Have a good rest. Tomorrow morning, we will coordinate with General Lakshan to attack the mercenaries. We will have to trouble General Mu Ren to keep watch tonight. Hu Bo-er called all the generals over, and after a series of praises, he gave the order. Hu Bo-er's troops on the left had already reached the foot of the mountain. Halfway up the mountain, they could even see the white torches in their camp. This made Lakshan, who was guarding the mountain, calm down. Now that the situation had been formed, they only had to wait until the next morning to completely wipe out the 400 mercenaries guarding the mountain. Then, they would be able to launch an attack from the inside and deal a heavy blow to the mercenaries at the foot of the mountain. Huh, what undefeatable mercenaries! What dogs hit war gods! I think they are just so. Lakshan laughed heartily, and under the praises of Mu Qi and the other generals, he returned to his tent to rest. Right now, he was just waiting for the moment he woke up to launch his counterattack. He wanted the world to see that the Ming dynasty's loyal and courageous people were not the only ones who knew how to fight. At the foot of the mountain, in the mercenary tent, Na Raizong was harshly scolding the small leaders of the Mongol tribes. What the hell are you guys doing? You said that you wanted to stop Hu Bo's troops, to prevent them from reaching the foot of the mountain so quickly. Now, they are just 20 li away from us, and we are about to be pincered from both sides. How do we explain this? Facing Na Raizong's scouts, the small leaders lowered their heads and did not speak. This was something that could not be helped. Originally, they had thought that they could just follow behind the mercenaries and take advantage of the situation. On the other hand, it was not suitable for them to deal with the 20,000 Tatar cavalry. In truth, they could not do it anyway. Humph. A bunch of useless things. Because of your mistakes, we can only wait for tomorrow's bitter battle. When the time comes, no one is to call for retreat. This was all because of our poor progress. Na Raizong continued to roar in anger. All right, everyone has done their best. Hu Bo brought 20,000 cavalrymen, how could they be so easy to deal with? Everyone, go and rest. There will be a bitter battle tomorrow. How can we not rest well? The deputy commander of the new army said like a good old man. Then, he sent those leaders out of the main tent with a smile on his face. After they left, Tiger's man stood up and said to Na Raizong, how was it? It's not that I didn't give them a chance, but that they did not know how to grasp it. What happens next, it's all up to me. This was what they had agreed upon. During the day, Na Raizong had volunteered to give the Mongol army a chance to perform. If they did not perform well, he would listen to Tiger's man's arrangements. Now that the truth was right in front of him, he had nothing to say. He nodded, I'm willing to accept my loss. From now on, we'll just listen to Commander Tiger's arrangements. Outside the main tent, a group of Mongol leaders walked out. Some of them had looks of dissatisfaction on their faces. Their forces were too spread out. Sometimes, a small tribe would only have a few hundred cavalrymen, while the bigger tribes would only have a few thousand. Asking such a small faction to fight the 20,000 Tatar cavalry was simply sending them to their deaths. However, there was one person who did not say anything from start to finish. He was one of the leaders of the Mongol army, Demutu. He seemed to have a lot on his mind. When he returned to his tent, he quickly wrote a note, recording everything that had happened in the main tent. He then took out his gerfalcon and walked out of the tent. Using the excuse that it was convenient, he went to a secluded place and released the gerfalcon into the air. Chapter 884. Demutu had another identity. He was a pawn that Tuachuo Buhua had planted in the Gobi Mongol tribe. The reason he could become the leader of the tribe was because of Demutu's help. Now was the time to use this pawn. Very soon, the news reached Hu Bo's subordinates, who were 20 kilometers away. When he saw the note, he completely relaxed. It seemed like his worries were unnecessary. It was all because the mercenaries trusted the Gobi Mongol tribe too much. This was their chance. After God knows how many days, Hu Bo could finally have a good night's sleep. They only had to wait until dawn to launch their attack. At that time, with Lakshan's attack from above and Demuta's help, they would be able to deal heavy damage to the mercenaries. On the black stone slope halfway up the mountain, Lakshan's army was also resting. They were also conserving their energy and waiting for the dawn to come so that they could counterattack with all their might. Before Tuachuo Buhua's main force arrived, they would first inflict heavy damage on the mercenaries and make a great contribution. The mercenaries' camp at the foot of the mountain also fell into silence. They were ordered to rest early after dinner, as though they were also preparing for the upcoming battle. However, very few people knew that the time they chose for the battle was not dawn, but the middle of the night. When it was the third night watch, which was the wee hours of the morning, the mercenary camp suddenly sounded a hurried whistle. The horn for an emergency assembly was officially blown. Countless soldiers in neat military uniforms walked out of the large tent, holding their sabers and leading their horses as they began to assemble. Although it was still pitch black at the top of Saihan Mountain, the densely packed mercenaries were already waiting with their swords in hand, ready for battle. The top of Saihan Mountain, which was where Lakshan's bait was not like what the outside world had guessed. There was only 1 battalion, but there were 20 battalions. In the past few days, the number of water carts delivering water to the top of the mountain had suddenly increased. However, few people knew that every carriage that went up the mountain was filled with mercenaries. They used the excuse of delivering water as an excuse to sneak into the mountain. All of this was part of Yang Chendong's plan. He wasn't a god, so he naturally didn't expect the Tatar army to use this as an attacking point to start the first battle. The reason why he had arranged for 20 battalions of soldiers and horses to be stationed here was to have an opportunity to deal a heavy blow to the Tatar army. However, he did not expect that it would come in handy so soon. The person in charge of hiding and guarding the mountain was none other than Su Yunsheng, who had just been promoted to captain of the reconnaissance team. This Su Yunsheng was an old man. When Yang Chendong was fighting in the southern Ming dynasty, he had served in the military. It could be said that he was a person with many military achievements. However, considering the importance of scouts and the extremely high standards of personnel, his official position was not high. However, as a regiment commander, he was given the rank of senior colonel, which was enough to prove his worth. If there came a day when he was no longer willing to work in the reconnaissance group, he was more than qualified to be a division commander. The mercenaries had their own security bureau, but it was hard to guarantee that the other forces would have their own intelligence organizations. Knowing that it was very likely that the senior officers under his command had already been targeted, Yang Chendong did not use them this time. Instead, he sent Su Yunsheng, who had always been elusive, to the mountain to be in charge of this undercover mission. Tian Hu and Bai Shuang were also on the mission with Su Yunsheng. They were all outstanding students in the First City Academy, especially in the field of military studies. This time, the two of them were assigned to cooperate with Captain Su in the battle, which was also a chance for them to participate in actual combat. 3 smart people, 3 capable people gathered together, so their strength could be imagined. When they received the report from the foot of the mountain that someone had set their sights on Mount Saihan, the 3 of them discussed and decided to beat them at their own game. They took the initiative to give up the magnetite slope halfway up the mountain. While showing weakness to the enemy, they were also looking for the best opportunity. Originally, the 3 of them were a little distressed. If Lakshan's troops attacked the top of the mountain, what would they do? They didn't expect the other party to cooperate with them so much that they would surround them but not attack. This made the 3 of them overjoyed, and at the same time, they arranged for the 20 battalions to rest early. At around 11 o'clock at night, they woke everyone up and prepared for the night attack. Night battle was one of the subjects that the mercenaries often trained in. When their nutrition could completely keep up, the so-called night blindness had nothing to do with them. With such a foundation, they already had the conditions to fight at night. And tonight was the time for them to launch a large-scale counterattack. Didn't Lakshan want to launch a 2-pronged attack? Well, then let's give him a taste of his own medicine. Let's launch a 2-pronged attack and completely annihilate him. The timing was a few hours earlier than the other party's attack, and they were already prepared. This allowed the mercenaries to gain the upper hand and have more chances of winning. In the early hours of the morning, the mercenary camp at the foot of the mountain became lively. With a flash bomb that lit up the sky for half a day, the general attack began. Troops began to attack Mount Saihan one after another. The sudden attack caught the enemy, who was resting on the magnetite slope halfway up the mountain, off guard. Lakshan came out of the large tent. As he put on his armor, he asked Mu Qi, who had rushed over, "What's going on?" "I'm not sure yet, but it seems like the mercenaries launched the attack in advance," Mu Qi replied with a puzzled expression. "Attacking at night or charging up the mountain, humph. I really don't know who gave the mercenaries the courage to face the enemy like this. Oh right, there's still a battalion of enemies on the mountain. There's no need to keep them here. Quickly send people to take them down." Lakshan's face revealed a cold expression. Although the mercenaries' strategy of attacking in the middle of the night was somewhat unexpected, he had the higher ground and did not slack off in his defense at night. It would not be easy for anyone to attack up the mountain. He only needed to wait until dawn, when his vision was no longer obstructed, and then he could lead the main force to launch a counterattack. However, would the mercenaries give them a chance to launch a counterattack? Just as Lakshan was still giving orders to Mu Qi, deafening battle cries suddenly sounded from the top of Mount Saihan behind them. 8,000 mercenaries charged down the mountain like ferocious tigers. Poor Lakshan. He had never taken the mercenaries on the mountain seriously, so he only arranged for 1,000 soldiers to defend. Logically speaking, 1,000 soldiers should be enough to fight against 400, but 1,000 against 8,000 was not a small difference. The 1,000 Tatar army did not even have time to figure out what was going on. They were greeted by a rain of arrows. Hundreds of people were injured and killed by the arrows. Then, their defensive line was instantly overwhelmed by the mercenaries who rushed down the mountain. Su Yunsheng, who was mixed in with the army, laughed loudly and waved the saber in his hand as he shouted, "Comrades, it's time to perform meritorious deeds. Charge! Charge!" Tian Hu and Bai Shuang also shouted crazily, their eyes flashing with excitement. The sudden appearance of the 8,000 mercenaries made the Tatar army dizzy. They had no idea where so many enemies had come from. Lakshan continuously mobilized his army to stop the Tatar army while lighting 3 bonfires that he had prepared beforehand. This was a signal for reinforcements. If the situation became dangerous, he would be able to use this to call for help from Hubo, or subordinates. The sudden movement of the mercenaries naturally did not escape the eyes of Hubo, or scouts. After the news was reported, Hubo, or got out of bed and saw the 3 bonfires lit. This made him very confused. What's going on? The battle has just begun. Why is General Lakshan asking for help? Are the mercenaries really so brave that they have already reached the middle of the mountain? Impossible. Mu Ren shook his head. The magnetite slope is a gentle slope that is about 2 li long. Although it is not very steep, it is long. The mercenaries could not have reached the middle of the slope so quickly. That's right. The terrain there is easy to defend and hard to attack. It is impossible for them to fall so quickly. General Hulan agreed. Forget it, forget it. Let's not worry about that for now. Since Lakshan has requested for help, he must have met with some unsolvable problem. How about this? We will immediately support him. General Hulan, quickly gather 5,000 cavalrymen and launch a fierce attack on the mercenary camp. General Mu Ren, follow up with 5,000 cavalrymen. No matter what, you must attract the attention of the mercenaries and reduce the pressure on General Lakshan. The sudden attack of the mercenaries caused the entire battlefield to move. Countless mercenaries moved out in an orderly manner, as though they had already decided on their target. On the other hand, the leaders of the Mongol tribes gathered in Narasong's tent with sleepy eyes. Even now, they did not know what was going on. Alright, since everyone is here, I will now assign the tasks. But before that, there's something we need to do first. Where's General Demutu? Na Raizong suddenly shouted as he looked at everyone with an excited expression. Yes. Instinctively, Demutu responded. As soon as he agreed, two burly Mongolian men immediately rushed towards him. Seeing that the situation was not good, he wanted to pull out his sword to resist. However, how could he be a match for them when they were unprepared? He was immediately pressed down. After being pressed down firmly, Demutu struggled to no avail. He immediately shouted, Narasong, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to use this opportunity to eliminate the dissidents? And all of you, are you just going to watch? Let me tell you, if he takes care of me today, he will take care of all of you tomorrow. Shut up, you traitor. Seeing that there was indeed a commotion in the crowd, Narasong immediately shouted. Originally, some of the leaders wanted to ask Narasong what he was trying to do. If he really wanted to eliminate them, then they would have to fight back. However, once they heard the word a traitor, they immediately shut their mouths. Chapter 885. Demutu, you are the traitor that Tuachuo planted in our tribe. Here are the letters you left behind when you contacted them. What else do you have to say? Na Raizong threw the letters onto the table. You searched my tent. Na Raizong, what right do you have to do that? Leaders and generals, he can search my tent for no reason today. Tomorrow, he might do the same to you. Everyone, you have to fight back. Demutu saw that the situation was not good, so he tried to persuade everyone. That's enough. Keep your mouth shut. Demutu, everyone else went back to their own tents after the meeting. You were the only one who let out a gerfalcon. What is the meaning of this? Who are you sending a message to? Do you think you did it without anyone knowing? Let me tell you, your every move has been discovered. What else do you have to say for searching your tent? Na Raizong would not allow Demutu to argue. He pointed out all kinds of mistakes. For a moment, the leaders and generals in the tent did not dare to make a move. Demutu only left those letters as evidence when he returned to Tuachuobuhua's side in the future. He did not expect that the letters would become evidence of his crimes. At this moment, he knew that he could not change the situation. He could only shout, that's right. I am Tuachuobuhua's man. He is the ruler of the grassland. Yang Chendong is just a Han. How can he lead us? Sooner or later, they will devour all of us. What we are doing now is helping the evildoer. Men, shut his mouth. Take him away and behead him in public. Also, behead his family in the tribe. This is the fate of a traitor. Na Raizong's eyes were cold. He was really angry at this moment. Before the war, the Mongol tribe of the Gobi Desert did not want to kill the enemy. Instead, they wanted to collude with the enemy. This made him feel humiliated. None of the leaders or generals pleaded for Demutu's fate. Since he was a traitor to the entire Gobi Desert Mongol tribe. Not only could the mercenaries not tolerate such a person, even they would not allow him to exist. No one wanted to feel like they were being watched by a traitor. At the foot of the mountain, Hu Lin led 5,000 cavalrymen and charged down Mount Saihan. The mercenaries had already expected Yang Chendong's appearance. It was said that besieging a stronghold to attack reinforcements was our army's specialty during wartime. Yang Chendong was very proficient in commanding such a battle. In this plan, the Tatar division had long been waiting along the path that they had to pass through. They were only waiting for the 5,000 cavalry led by Hu Lin to appear in the encirclement. Then, heaven-shaking battle cries sounded from both sides. A total of 20 battalions and a division of 8,100 cavalry charged out from both sides. The sound of arrows piercing through the air shot towards the unprepared but anxious Tatar cavalry. It was not the first time for Su He to fight a war between Tatars and Tatars. In the past, he was Agador's subordinate and did not get along well with Tuachuo. Now that he had such an opportunity, how could he be lenient? The 8,000 cavalrymen launched a surprise attack with their bows and arrows, killing at least 500 cavalrymen and injuring countless enemies. Hu Lin, who was charging, was stunned by this sudden ambush. Hu Lin was not a brainless person. After receiving the order, he was already prepared to be ambushed. However, he had only left the camp for 5 miles. How could he have encountered the enemy? Didn't this mean that the enemy's troops were all at his doorstep? Were the scouts of the Tatar army all incompetent? This was a little unfair to those scouts. Su He and the others had only just moved here. Before the scouts of the other side could report back, everything had already begun. Unprepared, Hu Lin's army retreated again and again until they met Mu Ren and the 5,000 cavalrymen behind them. Only then did they stabilize their footing. At that moment, the two armies converged and charged towards the Tatar division. Retreat. Su He did not want to fight head-on with the other side. Seeing that he had already gained a lot of advantages and had killed more than 2,000 enemies with his bows and arrows, he let the horn officer blow the horn. A division of cavalrymen quickly retreated. Chase. Hu Lin, who had been beaten until he was dizzy, was furious. Without doing anything, he had lost 40% of his troops. A flame of anger burned in his heart. He could not wait to charge forward and kill the mercenaries. General Hu, the situation is not right. It is better not to be rash. Seeing that the mercenaries had retreated the moment he appeared, Mu Ren had a bad feeling. Logically speaking, the other side should have been prepared and should not have retreated. It was as if they were tempting him to continue. What is wrong? It is obvious that the other side is cowardly and does not dare to face our cavalrymen head-on. They only know how to shoot arrows. If General Mu is afraid, then wait here for General Hu's arrival. I will bring my men and chase after them. The furious Hu Lin had lost his mind at this time. All he thought about was taking revenge for his brothers. How could he listen to anyone else's words? Hu Lin did not listen to his advice and continued to chase. Mu Ren could only shake his head and smile bitterly. While ordering the army to follow, he also sent someone to report the situation to General Hu Bo and ask him to immediately send out the necessary reinforcements. Moreover, Hu Lin took the lead, leading the remaining 3,000 cavalrymen in a fierce chase. In just an hour, they arrived at the foot of Mount Saihan. At this moment, the Tatar division that had been retreating earlier had stopped in their tracks and gotten into formation. It looked as though they would charge forward and devour them if they dared to come over. One side had a division of 20 battalions and 8,100 people. The other side only had 3,000 people. Hu Lin was furious, but at this moment, he could only suppress his anger and wait for the main force behind him to arrive. The first to arrive was Mu Ren. About a quarter of an hour after he arrived, General Hu Bo also arrived. Following him were 8,000 cavalrymen. In other words, only 2,000 cavalrymen were left behind to guard the headquarters. What's the situation? The moment Hu Bo arrived, his gaze first fell on General Su He and the enemy cavalrymen. He then raised his head to look at the dense sounds of fighting halfway up Saihan Mountain. The torches there were connected to one another. Looking from afar, one could still feel the intensity of the battle. General, there are close to 10,000 mercenaries blocking our way. Hu Lin requests to charge. After seeing Hu Bo, Hu Lin was filled with courage. General, the situation on the mountain doesn't seem right. Logically speaking, after fighting for so long, General Lakshan should have chased the mercenaries down the mountain. Why is it still in a stalemate? Mu Ren raised his head to look at the mountain with a puzzled expression. Even if the mercenaries suddenly attacked, with the terrain, Lakshan should have chased them down the mountain very quickly. How could the battle still not end after 2 hours? Although they were too far away and couldn't see the situation clearly, they could tell from the battle cries that this wasn't a situation where one side had a complete advantage. Instead, the battle was in a stalemate. This was a very strange thing. That's right, the situation is unclear. Let's wait and see. Since they could not figure out the situation, Hubo decided to be careful and observe the situation. If Lakshan was doomed, then he would retreat immediately and not continue to fight the mercenaries. What's there to wait for? Didn't the report say that the Mongolian tribes in the northeast sent out 20,000 cavalrymen to help the mercenaries? They must be the ones attacking the mountain, causing the stalemate. Humph. These mercenaries sure have a good plan. Using other people's soldiers to attack us, they are using a borrowed knife to kill us. Hu Lin saw that no one was paying attention to him and was extremely dissatisfied. Seeing that Hubo was still suspicious, he immediately voiced out his thoughts. Oh, that makes sense. Hearing Hu Lin's words, Hubo nodded in agreement. This was enough to show that if he was the commander of the mercenaries, he would also think of a way to use the 20,000 cavalrymen. After all, they were not his trusted subordinates. If they died, it would not be a pity. On the contrary, he would be able to use this opportunity to get rid of his enemies. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But will they be so obedient? Mu Ren raised his own objection. That was 20,000 cavalrymen. Their military strength was no less than the new mercenary army. They would be so obedient. If someone told them to charge, they would charge even if they knew it would be difficult. They would even charge even if they would suffer heavy losses. That makes sense. Hubo nodded. Originally, he wasn't such an indecisive person. But after losing to the mercenaries in Tulu City, he was really scared. Now, he was very careful and cautious in everything he did. The commander was hesitant, but this made Hu Lin anxious. Without receiving any orders, he could only suppress his urge to charge out and watch helplessly. Hubo, subordinate, Mu Ren, looked at the mountainside. He believed that even if the 20,000 Mongol soldiers charged out, they would not be able to last for long. After all, they were limited by the terrain and their numbers were similar. With the terrain, Lakshan's victory was only a matter of time. Time passed minute by minute. Another hour had passed. Finally, the battle cries from halfway up the mountain became softer. Many of the torches on the mountain that seemed to cover the sky had also been extinguished. Seeing this, Mu Ren finally heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at Hubo and said, "General, I believe that General Lakshan has already stabilized the situation. The enemy's morale must have dropped. This is the time for us to pincer attack." "That's right. Come, pass down my orders. Prepare to charge." Hubo was also relieved. He laughed and was about to give the order to charge. At this moment, a soldier beside him suddenly shouted, "Fire, fire, it's right behind us. It seems to be the direction of our camp." Chapter 886. This shout attracted the attention of the 3 generals. At this moment, the fire seemed to have lit up half the sky. The experienced soldiers estimated that it was about 20 miles away. Wasn't that their camp? What's going on? Hubo asked in confusion. Shouldn't the mercenaries focus on attacking the mountain and stopping them? How could they still have the energy to attack their own camp? No one answered Hubo's question. After a few moments of silence, countless shouts came from all directions. Following that, the scouts around the army quickly reported back. "General, there are enemies in the east. General, there are enemies in the west. There are countless of them. General, there are people behind us." Because it's too dark, we can't see how many people there are. We can only see the torches and shadows. Hu Bo's expression changed again and again. He couldn't understand why so many enemies had suddenly appeared. Where did they come from? How could the mercenaries have so many soldiers? Could it be that all the mercenaries in the beginning city had been mobilized? Hu Bo obviously did not understand. These were the 20,000 cavalrymen from the Gobi Mongol tribe, as well as the new heavy cavalry, light cavalry and the scouts. Just as Mu Ren had suspected, charging up the mountain was not something that anyone was willing to do. Even if the mercenaries gave the order, the Gobi Mongol army would not follow it. This was obviously a suicidal move. It was not something that could be obeyed with just a single order. In fact, the army attacking the mountain was only one division of the new army. Of course, there were also the 8,000 mercenaries who had charged down from the top of Saihan Mountain. Su Yunsheng suddenly brought 8,000 soldiers down from the sky and caught Lakshan off guard. Although he did not understand why there were 20 enemy battalions on the mountain, the battle had already begun and he had no way out. First, he sent Mu Qi to lead 5,000 soldiers to stop the mercenaries' charge. With the advantage and preparation, how could 5,000 soldiers stop them? In less than an hour, the army was defeated and Mu Qi died in the battle. At this moment, the new division of the new army began their attack from the foot of the mountain. For a moment, Lakshan was attacked from both sides, and the situation was critical. Taking advantage of the chaos in the Tatar army, Su Yunsheng rushed down the mountain, broke through several enemy lines of defense, killed his way to the pass of the Black Stone Slope, and seized it. No one stopped them anymore. The recruits at the foot of the mountain successfully ascended the mountain. After the two armies met, they had a huge advantage in terms of numbers. They charged straight for Lakshan's army. Amidst the chaos and the death of their general, the morale of the Tatar army plummeted. They were no match for Su Yunsheng and Lu Zhua. Amidst the chaos, many Tatar cavalrymen dismounted and surrendered. Only Lakshan and his 5,000 cavalrymen continued to resist. The chaotic scene that Hu Bo and Mu Ren saw at the foot of the mountain was exactly this moment, and it was completely different from what they had guessed. It wasn't Lakshan who was killing the mercenaries, but the mercenaries who were fighting back. They only had 5,000 cavalrymen, and they were all panicking and low in morale. How could they be a match for the mercenaries who were full of fighting spirit? After a few attacks, the formation of the army was in chaos, and their morale was low. In less than an hour, Lakshan had died, and his cavalrymen had either died or surrendered. The battle at the waist of the mountain had ended, and the next step was to deal with Hu Bo's troops at the foot of the mountain. According to Yang Chendong's words, it was like eating one and watching one. Now that they had finished eating, it was time to eat the one they had been watching. Hu Bo had made the wrong judgment, thinking that they had the advantage in the chaos at the waist of the mountain. Due to the wrong analysis of the situation, and the mistake of not choosing to escape, they had completed the encirclement in the 2 hours they had been at the foot of the mountain. 20,000 cavalrymen were currently charging towards Hu Bo's 16,000 cavalrymen from all directions. The first to act were the mercenaries, and Tiger's man personally led his troops to attack. An independent division was not part of the first army, and Tiger's man could not stop them. However, the only thing he could do was to transfer the 6-gun battalions from the independent division to the army. Now, the first one to charge at them was this gun squad. More than 2,000 pitch-black muzzles from the 6 battalions rang out, landing in the midst of the Tatar cavalry, drawing out streams of blood and taking away the lives of several hundred cavalry. "Break out, all of you break out." Seeing that the enemy in front of them had guns and was so ferocious, Hu Bo had no choice but to give up on the idea of joining forces with Lakshan. Instead, she rode her horse out. She had no idea how many enemies there were outside, and in the darkness, she could not determine the enemy's strength. The only thing she could do was try her luck and charge in all directions. Chase. The Tatar division commander He saw that the enemy was about to escape, and he immediately led his 8,000 troops to give chase. At that moment, the bugle call for all troops to charge sounded out, and at the foot of Saihan Mountain, battle cries rang out everywhere. This was not a fair battle. Be it in terms of numbers or morale, before the battle even started, the Tatar cavalrymen were already in a passive position. Compared to the Tatar army that was like a headless fly, there were enemies everywhere, and they did not know when an arrow would land on them. As there were simply too many enemies, in order not to become a target, they even extinguished their torches. This caused many of them to run straight to the mercenaries and be killed or captured. The chaos on the battlefield lasted from night till dawn, and the mercenaries and the Mongol tribesmen killed and captured until dawn. Close to 20,000 Tatar troops were wiped out in one night, and in the end, only Hu Bo, Muran and a few hundred others managed to escape. Even Hu Lin was killed by arrows. The North Ming Xian Mansion's commander-in-chief, who was also the commander-in-chief, Shi Wan Lin, and the deputy commander-in-chief, who was also the commander-in-chief, Ning Wenfeng, used the excuse of returning to Lu City from Shi City as an excuse to pass by the battlefield and witness the end of the battle. They saw that the Tatar army lost 40,000 cavalrymen in just one night. Among them, 10,000 were killed and 30,000 were captured. The two of them remained silent. This kind of result was unimaginable. After having a direct understanding of the mercenaries' strength, they began to worry. If one day they were to become enemies with the mercenaries, would they be beaten like the Tatar cavalry without any strength to fight back? Compared to the two Baiming generals who were depressed, the 20,000 Mongol tribesmen were overjoyed. On this very night, they captured 10,000 enemies and seized countless warhorses, swords, and spears. However, they had only paid the price of less than 500 casualties. Such a huge victory was hard to come by in 100 years, and at this moment, they were filled with admiration for the strength of the mercenaries. It also made many of them more determined to follow the Heavenly Khan. The new army captured 20,000 enemies, and 2,000 died in the battle, and 3,000 were injured. This was mainly because they were heavily injured in the Battle of Xianxia Slope. However, this loss was nothing compared to what they had gained. Not long after, when the results of the battle reached Shi City, the entire city cheered and shouted, "Long live the Heavenly Khan," as they walked on the streets to celebrate. Inside the Yang mansion, compared to the silence outside, it was unusually quiet. Considering that the sixth young master had too many important matters to consider, the commoners within 2 miles of the Yang mansion were all cleared to create a quiet environment for him. Of course, because of this, his safety was much more guaranteed. Yang Qindong sat in the courtyard, and in front of him was the latest battle report. His right hand gently placed the report on the stone table, and Yang Qindong stood up and tidied his clothes. He knew that it was time for the final battle with the Tatar cavalry. Since the establishment of Shi City, it was first Agar Dorji from the Tatar tribe who brought 50,000 soldiers to find trouble with him, and then Hu Bo, who brought 50,000 soldiers to find trouble with him. Now that they had all been defeated, Tua Buhua had finally appeared. He had brought 80,000 soldiers, and in the first battle, he had killed 40,000 enemies. It must be very painful for him. I'm a good person, and I like to do good deeds. Let me end your pain. Yang Qindong smiled and walked out of the Yang family manor. On a huge plain north of Saihan, the mercenaries and the Tatar cavalry finally met. Yang Qindong, the Heavenly Khan, and Tua Buhua officially met here. When a king meets a king must die. In just one night, half of the soldiers had been lost. When the news reached Tua Buhua's ears, his usually calm face revealed a trace of shock. Soon after, Hu Bo, and Mu Ren who had escaped were brought to his main tent. Tuachuo Buhua's figure wasn't very tall. He was only 1.73 meters tall, and his weight of 120 kilograms made him look even less burly. However, it was this person who had unified the Tatar tribe and became their Khan. Once upon a time, Tua Buhua had caused many people to not be able to eat or sleep well. He had also caused many people to fear and hate him, including the great Ming dynasty and the Walla's leader, Yes Hen. But now, he had been beaten to such a state. He was not willing to accept this. After hearing Hu Bo-er's report, Tua Buhua stretched out his right hand and pointed at the trembling Hu Bo-er. Then, his finger moved and landed on Mu Ren. A defeated general must be punished. Otherwise, how can he lead the army? Men, drag him out and behead him in public. He'll be sacrificed to the army. Ah! Great Khan, no. I'm willing to be the leader of the suicide squad. I only ask that you give me a chance. General Hu, save me, save me. Amidst the shouts, the Mu Ren was dragged out of the main tent. Hu Bo-er was left trembling. He knew that just now, the Khan had revealed his intention to kill him. He had taken a trip to the gates of hell. Chapter 887. You. Do you know what to do next? Tua Buhua pointed at Hu Bo-er again. I know. I am willing to be the leader of the suicide squad. I only hope that Great Khan will give me a chance to die like a brave warrior. Hu Bo-er raised his head as tears welled up in his eyes. Good, I will give you a chance. General Monk, you and Hu Bo will be in charge of the left and right armies. This Khan will be in charge of the middle army. Let us work together and fight to the death with this great Ming brat. If we win, the glory of our Tatar tribe will be reborn. If we lose, then let us turn into a pile of yellow soil and be buried here forever. Yes. Another burly man in armor in the main tent responded, and then half knelt on the ground. Right now, Tua Buhua still had 30,000 elite Tatar cavalry and 10,000 ordinary cavalry. In terms of numbers, the mercenaries had 50,000, including 20,000 from the Mongol tribe. The difference in numbers was 10,000. However, Tua Buhua was leading the most elite Tatar cavalry. On the battlefield, they could take on 3, 5, or even more. Just from this point alone, they still had a chance of victory. At this point, Tua Buhua did not want to retreat anymore. With 40,000 cavalry, he could go to other places and become a king. However, the humiliation that the mercenaries had brought them had to be washed away. Otherwise, even if he died, he would not be able to rest in peace. Both sides had close to 100,000 cavalry in total. From afar, tents were next to tents, and war horses were next to war horses. Everyone seemed to know that this was a battle to the death. No one held any hope. Just like that, blade against blade, spear against spear, they laid out their chariots and horses. There was no discussion, but they all made the same decision to fight to the death the next day. Within the main tent of the mercenaries, Yang Chendong was holding a meeting with all the generals. This meeting was different from the previous ones. There was not even a sand table in front of them, nor were there any battle plans. At the start of the meeting, as the leader, Yang Chendong had already set the tone. There's no need for any strategy in this battle. Tua won't use any tricks, nor will he divide his forces to create an opportunity for us. Some of them are just warhorses charging head-on. Some of them are just to see whose bones are harder and whose saber is sharper. Let me ask you, are you afraid? Not at all. All the officers replied in unison, their voices echoing throughout the main tent. All right. Yang Chendong looked at everyone with an encouraging gaze. Then, he pointed at Su He and said, Division Commander Su, I'll let you introduce the 30,000 elite cavalry under Tua Buhua. Yes. Su He stood up and saluted Yang Chendong and the other officers. As a former member of the Tatar cavalry, he was very familiar with the situation of this cavalry. Comrades, there are only 40,000 cavalry left. 10,000 of them are ordinary cavalry. There is no need to worry about them. I believe that any of our troops can defeat them. He. Hearing such confident words, the officers present all had smiles on their faces. Even the small leaders of the Mongol tribes in the north of the Gobi Desert laughed along. Although their combat strength was average, they had the advantage in numbers. As the saying goes, a random fist can kill a master. Who are they afraid of? While the officers were laughing, Suhi's face became serious. However, the 30,000 elite cavalry cannot be underestimated. Tua Buhua spent a lot of effort to create them. Although they may not have been through hundreds of battles, they are veterans who have been through dozens of battles. They have rich combat experience and will not retreat without orders. Even if their formation is attacked, they will rely on a small number of people to deal with the enemy until the end of the battle or until all of them die. At this point, Suhi seemed to see the disdain on the faces of the officers present. He continued in a deep voice, "You may not know this, but Agadorji was bewitched by Yeshen and surrounded Tua Buhua with him. At that time, he only had 5,000 cavalry with him. However, with these 5,000 cavalry, he was able to break out of the encirclement. Do you know how many cavalrymen he faced at that time? There were a total of 100,000 of them, but they still left as if there was no one around. Hiss! The sound of cold air being sucked in could be heard. 5,000 cavalrymen were able to break out of the encirclement of 100,000 people. This was an incredible achievement. Division Commander Su, have you fought with them before? The commander of the new army, Tiger Main, asked. He firmly believed that seeing was believing. If this was just hearsay, it was not enough to believe. Commander Tiger, I am ashamed to say this, but I have fought with them before. At that time, I led 10,000 cavalrymen and was on the outside of the encirclement. However, when the 5,000 cavalrymen rushed out, I sent some soldiers to stop them. After a chaotic battle, they managed to escape. After the battle, we lost 1,300 cavalrymen while they only left behind a few dozen corpses. At this point, Suhi couldn't help but lower his head. This achievement was one of the biggest defeats in his life. It was obvious that he really didn't want to talk about it. However, at this moment, no one looked down on Suhi. Instead, everyone fell into silence. The atmosphere in the tent was very oppressive. The strength of these 30,000 elite cavalry was beyond everyone's imagination. For a moment, everyone was at a loss of what to do. Even some of the leaders of the North Desert unknowingly showed fear on their faces. They were probably thinking of retreating at this moment. The morale of the generals quickly fell at this moment. Suhi's voice continued to sound. These cavalrymen are completely different from ordinary cavalrymen. They hold a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. They rely on their superb horse skills to maintain their balance on the battlefield. The sword is a Mongolian scimitar. In close combat, it is more in line with the principles of mechanics. It doesn't need the soldier's own strength. Just the charge of the horse is enough to easily cut off the enemy's head. This saves a lot of energy in the process. The shield can be used to block the enemy's sword. This way, they can better protect themselves. It is this combination of a sword and a shield that allows them to have the strongest spear and the strongest shield at the same time. Often when you are fighting for your life, when you slash with your sword, the shield will block it. If you don't react fast enough, the enemy's scimitar will chop your neck. At that time, because I didn't understand this point, the cavalrymen under my command suffered a great loss. Even the dozens of cavalrymen who were able to kill the enemy were only able to achieve a small result because of the crowd. After explaining everything he knew and understood, Suhi saluted Yang Chendong and returned to the group. Then, everyone's gaze fell on Yang Chendong. In many of their hearts, this was the god of war. This was the 100 victories general. the battles under his command would never fail. When everyone's gaze fell on him, Yang Chendong's originally calm face revealed a trace of a smile. "Huh, the strongest shield and the strongest spear. Interesting. But I don't know how strong their shields will be when they are faced with muskets." Ha ha ha. With just a few words, the atmosphere in the main tent instantly relaxed. That's right, no matter how strong you are, when facing the muskets and cannons, can you really be invulnerable? Everyone laughed, and the original atmosphere was no longer that oppressive. Yang Chendong timely stretched out his hand and pressed it down. For a moment, the tent became quiet again. "We have muskets and powerful cannons, but I don't think these are the treasures that can defeat all opponents. If we want to become the strongest cavalrymen in the world, then we are destined to gather the strengths of others and the strengths of others. We must learn from each other's strengths to make up for our weaknesses. In the end, we will become the invincible and undefeatable cavalry of the prairie. The 30,000 elite cavalrymen of the Tatar Empire may be very strong, but in my opinion, they are more like a whetstone blade that sharpens us. Let's put it this way, I am preparing to build another division. This division will be called the 1st Cavalry Division. It will have 3 regiments, each with 5 battalions, a total of 6,000 men. This division commander, 3 regimental commanders, and 15 battalion commanders will not be appointed based on seniority or nationality. It will all be based on personal strength. It will all be based on personal bravery and merit. Their treatment is far better than the other units. It is the same as the current Cold Vanguard unit, or even better. Let's put it this way. To be able to enter this division, one's whole family will ascend to heaven. When a Han rider enters the division, a hero's plate will be hung high in the family, and it will be respected by the world. When a foreign rider enters the division, he will be registered as a Han citizen. From a soldier to an officer, he will be able to bring one of his family members to be registered as a Han citizen. If he is promoted, he will be able to bring his whole family to be registered as a Han citizen. Before Yang Chendong could finish his words, the entire main tent was already bustling with noise and excitement. Anyone who had been to the first city would know the importance of being registered as a Han citizen. In the past, this people who were regarded as herbivores and were called weak and bullied had a high status that people could only envy and look up to. As long as one was a Han citizen, whether it was dividing land, paying taxes, or buying things, they had a lot of privileges. Even the rule in the first city that outsiders had to live in for 5 years to be qualified to own a local house was reduced to 3 years when it fell on the Han citizens. This was only one of the embodiments. There were many other benefits that could not be described in detail. Let's put it this way. As long as you were a Han citizen, you were born to be superior to others. Even if you went to work, your salary would be 1.5 times or even more than 2 times that of other ethnic groups. Not to mention getting a job in the city. Whether a Han citizen wanted to be an official or join the army, the conditions would be much lower. Because of this, the Han people became a high and mighty existence. In order to be on good terms with them, countless young Mongolian girls in the city vowed to only marry Han men so that their next generation could live better. Chapter 888. There were many benefits to being a Han person, and everyone had a deep understanding of it. Fortunately, the Han people did not have the habit of bullying other races, or rather, they did not have the time to develop this habit. Although the other races were somewhat dissatisfied, they could not find a reason to express it. However, it was undeniable that they also yearned to become Han people in their hearts. It was just that there was no opportunity to obtain this power. For example, one of the higher-ups in the army, the Tatar division commander Suhi, was still a Tatar. Even such a general could not become a Han person, let alone others. This matter of promotion could only be an idea. But now, Yang Chendong formally raised this issue in front of everyone and gave the corresponding conditions. As long as they could meet these conditions, they would be promoted. This made everyone see hope. Some of the small tribal leaders who originally wanted to retreat were also moved because of this. They clenched their fists tightly and had an appearance of wanting to perform well. Everyone's morale was completely stimulated by Yang Chendong's words. The conditions are there. If you can kill 3 Tatar elite cavalry, you can join the 1st Cavalry Division. If you kill 4 people, you will be a squad leader. If you kill 5 people, you will be a deputy platoon leader. If you kill 6 people, you will be a platoon leader, and so on. In short, the opportunity is in front of everyone. How to fight for it is up to everyone. Of course, if you are not the opponent of these elite cavalry, then retreat. I will use guns and cannons to solve everything in the end. Where to go, everyone can choose. At the end of the meeting, Yang Chendong gave everyone a reassurance that the 30,000 Tatar elite cavalry who were invincible in the eyes of others were not in his eyes. The reason why he did not use guns and cannons was because he wanted to use them as a whetstone to hone the combat power of the cavalry. With such a guarantee, how could everyone be afraid? A war was destined to not be lost. What was important was the performance of the battle process. The Han soldiers were thinking about how cool it would be to hang a hero's plate in their house. The grassland people were thinking about how their descendants would benefit from this action of theirs if it could be done. At this moment, no one was against the war in front of them, and no one showed any signs of fear. In fact, they didn't even want guns and cannons to appear on the battlefield, because they only had one thing in mind, and that was how they could perform well in this battle and successfully join the 1st Cavalry Division, so that they could bring glory to their ancestors and be respected by the future generations. Under Yang Chendong's intention, the contents of the meeting were quickly spread out. Then, the entire camp was in an uproar. Other than the fierce Tiger Regiment, all the other soldiers were tempted. Regardless of whether they were Han soldiers or foreign soldiers, they all had a goal in their hearts, and that was to perform better on the battlefield tomorrow. At daybreak, many soldiers got out of bed without being reminded. Then, they began to sharpen their sabers, wash their horses, check their stirrups, and other things. All of them were ready to do their best and perform well. The sky slowly brightened, and the cooks began to cook. The aroma began to spread in the camp, but at this moment, no matter how delicious the food was, it seemed to give everyone a sense of dullness. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the enemy camp 10 li away, and killing intent filled the sky. In the Tatar camp, Tuachuo Buhua also began to raise the tent after breakfast. 10,000 ordinary cavalry became logisticians, responsible for the army's food supply and other matters. The 30,000 elite cavalry divided into 3 different directions and began to move towards the mercenary camp. With these 30,000 invincible elite cavalry, Tuachuo Buhua was confident that he could defeat any opponent. Reality would also prove that the Tatar elite cavalry was undefeatable and undefeatable, the strongest cavalry in the world. According to the previous arrangement, Hu Boer would be on the left, Menk on the right, and he would personally lead 10,000 elite cavalry in the middle. As long as the 3 of them moved together, they would be able to break through the formation of the mercenaries, and finally kill their way to that ignorant brat who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. At that time, they would use the Mongolian curved horses to teach Yang Chendong how to behave, and tell him who was the strongest in the Central Plains. With the invincible elite cavalry of this era, Tuachuo Buhua was not afraid of any schemes from the mercenaries. He believed that in front of absolute strength, nothing could stop them from advancing. In the past, Yes Hen of the Wara Empire could not do it, and now, Yang Chendong could not do it either. With great ambition, the 30,000 elite Tatar cavalry set out. After advancing for 5 li, 6 li, 7 li, the mercenary camp did not move at all, and a look of disdain flashed across Tuachuo Buhua's eyes. He did not know what kind of game the enemy was playing, but he knew that when there was only 3 li left, his elite cavalry would be able to charge over. At that time, no one would be able to stop them. Pass down the order, prepare to attack. The arrogant Tuachuo Buhua sat on his horse and gave the order to the flag bearer. Boom boom boom. However, without waiting for the command flag to issue the order, 3 ear-splitting sounds of cannons rang out. The cannons landed about 200 meters in front of Tuachuo Buhua's left, middle, and right troops. The loud rumbling sound caused the elite cavalry to cry out in disarray. Even animals were afraid of fire and loud explosions, and war horses were even more so. Reality had proven that even the most well-trained war horses would lose control in front of the cannons. The 3 cannons completely wiped away the confidence on Tuachuo Buhua's face. For the first time, fear appeared in his heart. How much of his 30,000 elite cavalry would be able to fight against the mercenaries with such advanced weapons? Just as he was thinking, a rider came from the distance. It was the new commander of the army, Tiger's Mane. His epaulette sparkled under the sunlight as he shouted. Our heavenly Khan feels that Tuachuo Buhua is a hero and is willing to meet you with weapons in the spirit of mutual appreciation. This time, the enemy can only send out 2,000 cavalry to fight, regardless of life or death. This is the condition that our heavenly Khan has proposed. We are both using cavalry. This is already the greatest respect to Tuachuo Buhua Khan. I also hope that you can abide by the rules. Otherwise, the artillery just now is just an appetizer. Soon, this area will be covered by artillery. At that time, I don't think I need to tell you what will happen. You can choose where you want to go or what you want to do. Hiya. Yang Chendong was the only one who could send a military commander as a messenger. After completing the mission, Tiger's Mane rode back to the barracks and came in front of Yang Chendong. Young master, I've finished. I heard. Yang Chendong nodded. Young master, can I participate in the next battle? Taking advantage of this opportunity, Hu Mang tried to sound Yi Futian out. No. He replied firmly. Then he said that you and the deputy commander can't participate in the battle. Other than that, the others can do as they wish. Tiger's Mane was the person he trusted the most. He could not lose him. Although the name of the 1st Cavalry Division was dazzling and attractive, Tiger's Mane was already the commander of the new army. There was no need for him to take this path. As for Tuachuo Buhua, although his horsemanship was not bad, it was only not bad. In a real battle, anything could happen. It was too much of a waste to send such a wise commander to the front lines. If something happened to him, it would be too late for regrets. This was an absolute order. Even though Hu Mang wanted to perform well and prove that his horsemanship had improved greatly during this period of time, since it was the 6th young master who had ordered him to do so, he naturally wouldn't disobey. He could only agree and leave. In front of the elite Tatar cavalry, Tuachuo Buhua called Hu Bo, and Menk over to discuss military matters. Now that you know the situation, tell me what to do. Originally, Tuachuo Buhua was full of confidence and wanted to crush the mercenaries. However, before the battle even began, their morale had already taken a huge hit. Now, Tuachuo Buhua felt a heavy pressure in his heart that made it hard for him to breathe. The mercenaries' cannons are too powerful. If those 3 cannons landed in our army, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hu Bo did not express his opinion first. Instead, he spoke in a tactful manner. When he said this, the 3 of them were speechless. After a short while, Menk spoke up, so be it. With our elite cavalry strength, I don't believe that we can't take care of them. As time goes on, we will kill more and more people. At that time, we will still be able to obtain victory. This meant that he had agreed to the other party's request. Although Tuachuo Buhua did not want to, the mercenaries had powerful cannons. Unless he retreated now, he could only follow the other party's plan. Alright, then let's do it. We will use our true strength to show them how strong our elite Tatar cavalry is and how undefeatable we are. Tuachuo Buhua wanted to defeat Yang Chendong. The first city behind him was too prosperous and was built on the grasslands. It was like a tree without roots. This was a base that he urgently needed. As long as he took down this place, it would not be long before he could repeat the glory of the Tatar tribe. This huge temptation made him unable to retreat. He could only play according to Yang Chendong's rules. The Tatar army agreed and sent out the first group of 2,000 cavalry. This group of cavalry was personally led by Monk. Clearly, they wanted to win the lottery. Facing the 2,000 elite cavalry sent out by the Tatar army, the mercenaries also sent out 2,000 cavalry from the north of the desert. It was clear that the promotion last night had moved many people. There were many small leaders who volunteered to fight. Perhaps they were worried that if they did not take the initiative in the beginning, they would not have the chance to do so in the future. Chapter 889. Tell the cavalry warriors that as long as they kill 3 people, they can retreat. Of course, if you still have the ability, you can choose to kill more people. There will be different military merits waiting for you. We have people on the side watching and recording. Of course, if you feel that you can't win, you can retreat. You won't be charged with desertion. In front of the first echelon of 2,000 foreign tribe cavalry and tens of thousands of soldiers, Yang Chendong made such a solemn promise. He was now the heavenly Khan. Every word he said was no less than an imperial edict. The reason why he made such a concession was because he was worried that the Tatar elite cavalry was too powerful and would scare these warriors. In the end, no one dared to fight, and that would be a joke. With such a promise, they could retreat if they killed 3 people. If they couldn't win, they could retreat. Just based on these 2 points, those who didn't dare to try before were moved. What if they were lucky? 2,000 tribal allied army set out. They stood face to face with the Tatar elite cavalry. There was only a distance of 1 li between the 2 sides. This was the time for the cavalry to display their greatest strength. Compared to the 2,000 tribal allied army cavalry, the 2,000 Tatar elite cavalry seemed to be more uniform and orderly. They were dressed in winter clothes, with their left hands holding scimitars and their right holding shields. Their faces were masked, and their heads were covered with black headscarves, revealing only their eyes. They also wore long black cloaks and wore riding boots with daggers attached to them. They all carried large bows on their backs. Just by looking at them, they gave off an extremely fierce feeling. 4,000 people looked at each other. 8,000 eyes looked at each other. With a loud shout, both sides launched their most powerful charge. 4,000 cavalry warriors clashed in the blink of an eye. Then came the clash between the scimitar and the scimitar, the clash between the scimitar and the shield, the friction between the scimitar and the air, and the cutting of flesh and blood. The men borrowed the power of the horse, and the scimitar borrowed the power of the wind. Raising the scimitar, descending, chopping, dodging, or falling off the horse. The cruel side of the battle was constantly displayed on the battlefield. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. This was destined to be a bloody battle that would be written into history. Ding ding dang dang, this battle lasted for an hour. Following that, more and more cavalrymen from the northern desert tribes fled. The number of people on the battlefield was constantly decreasing. After another hour, the battlefield became quiet again. The elite Tatar cavalry had won. The Mongolian coalition army of the Gobi Desert sent out 2,000 men, but about 500 men escaped. Among them, the best one killed 2 men, but because there was no one by his side and he was in danger of being surrounded by several elite riders, he had no choice but to retreat. Not a single qualified soldier was selected in the first battle. This was a heavy blow to the morale of the entire mercenary army. On the other hand, the Tatar elite cavalry had killed 1,500 enemies and only lost less than 50 riders. This kind of 1:30 casualty ratio made the soldiers cheer unceasingly, their morale greatly boosted. Treat the injured warriors and arrange for the second batch of soldiers to take over. Yang Qindong sat on a large chair, surrounded by his black knights. Seeing the complete defeat of the first battle, he did not show the slightest anger or disappointment. Everything was within his expectations. If there was anything unexpected, it would be that the performance of the elite Tatar cavalry was stronger than he expected. However, this was even better. Since he wanted to create the first cavalry division and create the strongest cavalry in the world, the sharper the whetstone, the better. After the order was given, the second batch of 2,000 cavalrymen charged out. Although the failure of the first battle was a severe blow to their morale, they also learned some experience at the same time. For example, if they found that there were too many retreating cavalrymen, there was no need for the rest of them to fight hard. Otherwise, they would only be surrounded by the cavalrymen, and there was no other choice but to die. After the first experience, the second batch of soldiers charged out closer. They tried their best to be under the protection of their comrades. This way, they could face the enemy without worrying about being attacked from the front and back. After the first experience, Tua Buhua did not send any generals to lead the troops. Against these average Mongolian cavalrymen, there was no need to send any generals. They could also heavily injure the enemy. In the first battle, they had killed 1,500 enemies. If this continued, it would not be long before the enemy ran out of soldiers to send. Thinking about that, Tua Buhua had an urge to laugh out loud. Heaven Khan, do you think that I am afraid of you just because you outnumber me? Then I will let you see how wrong your decision is. The second battle began. Compared to the first battle, it was much more intense. It was obvious that everyone had used all their strength and did not hold back. This was a real battle, a bloody battle. It was either you die or I die. Any carelessness could lead to irreparable consequences. Everyone only had one life. If anyone did not use all their strength, they would be facing death. The battle continued for an hour. During this time, hundreds of Alliance army cavalrymen had retreated. Perhaps they felt that they were not strong enough and that if they continued to fight, they would only die. Or perhaps they were injured and could not fight anymore. Either way, the situation on the battlefield was worrying. On the entire battlefield, there were less than 300 Alliance army cavalrymen. Looking at the Tatar elite cavalry, only a few dozen had died. There were not many casualties. Kill, continue to kill. I still need one more person to join the army. In the battle, a very young Mongol cavalryman was still waving his blade. He blocked left and right and solved another crisis. His name was Hu Helu. He was a young man from a small Mongol tribe. Like most Mongols, Hu Helu grew up on horseback, and this allowed him to train his skills on horseback quite well. However, his best skill was still the knife-cutting technique. It was said that it was taught by a veteran soldier who passed by their tribe to recuperate. In order to learn this skill, Hu Helu secretly killed a fat sheep in his family and gave it to the other party. Then, when the other party left, his horse skills had improved greatly. This time, he had signed up for the battlefield because he wanted to bring the book with him. When Hu Helu was shopping in the first city, he accidentally saw the performance of the female soldiers of the first city's publicity team. The young him was quickly attracted by those beautiful girls. As a result, he had the first dream in his life, which was to marry a female soldier of the publicity team. This seemed to be a very honorable thing. Hu Helu was considered handsome, which was also where his confidence came from. However, when he inquired about the female soldiers of the propaganda team, he discovered a fatal problem. There was a prerequisite for these female soldiers to choose a husband, and that was that the other party had to be of Han nationality. Only then could their status be considered equal. When he heard this, Hu Helu was naturally very unhappy. Compared to the Han people, he was not inferior. He was willing to work hard and was good-looking. He could rely on his own two hands to obtain a happy and wealthy living environment. Of course, although he was angry, Hu Hela had to admit that at least in the first city, the status of the Han people was extremely high. It was far from what a person from a small tribe like him could compare to. Therefore, from then on, he had an idea in his heart, which was to find a way to become a Han person and become a member of this powerful nation. At that time, he would definitely marry the most beautiful female soldier and fulfill his dream. However, how difficult was it to choose a new nationality? He had never heard of such a precedent. Until last night, there was suddenly a piece of news that as long as one could kill 3 enemies on the battlefield, he could choose to become a Han person. If one could kill 4 enemies, he could bring one more person to become a Han person. A great thing fell from the sky. Hu Hela felt that the blood in his body seemed to be burning at this moment. He knew that the long-awaited opportunity had come, so he had to seize it. The realization of one's dream always needed to be fought. The opportunity was right in front of him, and Hu Hela did not want to let it go. Facing the powerful elite Tatar cavalry, he used all his skills. Not long after the battle started, he took advantage of the chaos and chopped off the head of an enemy cavalry. Then, in the middle of the battlefield, he stabbed his saber into the chest of an enemy. After killing 2 people in a row, the target was right in front of him. Hu Hela saw hope. However, the surrounding environment also became vile. He still had about 300 companions around him, and some of them were constantly retreating. The number of enemies was increasing more and more. Wanting to kill one enemy in this kind of environment was easier said than done. Right now, Hu Hela could choose to immediately retreat. This way, he could protect his own safety. After all, the mercenary camp was half a li behind him. As long as he retreated there, the Tatar cavalry would not dare to pursue him. There were more than 3,000 muskets of the ferocious Tiger Regiment placed there. They could take his life at any time. But if he did that, his dream would be shattered. This was something he could not accept. Therefore, he only had one choice left, and that was to continue killing the enemy. Even if he only killed one person, he would be able to become a Han person. Everything in the future would become bright. It was too late to say, but all these thoughts were formed in an instant. At this moment, Hu Hela's eyes revealed a wolf-like light. At this moment, he was determined to kill one more enemy. It was also at this time that 2 elite Tatar cavalry appeared in his field of vision. They discovered him and rushed towards him. Looking around, Hu Hela did not see any other enemy cavalry within 3 zhang of him. He knew that this was his chance. Even though there were 2 riders approaching, he was still fearless and charged head-on. Borrowing the momentum of the horse, Hu Hela's feet left the stirrups. A bold idea quickly formed in his mind. If he wanted to avoid the enemy's saber, then he had to abandon his horse. Otherwise, even if he could kill the enemy, he would be killed by the enemy. You're tuning in to the UnparalleledSwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.